We were discussing how when someone mentions the Holy Spirit putting a person in a situation potentially traumatic to respond in a suitable way and save the day, so to speak. And John talks about the Holy Spirit pointed in that direction. But I would have thought that the behavioral response would be an instinctual one. But is there some sort of relationship between the human instinct and the Holy Spirit?
Oh, it's a very good question. I'd say that instinct is typically associated with more kind of primal reactions, like a fight or flight response.
Yeah.
But there's something else called intuition.
Yes.
Which is just another name for the Holy Spirit. It's your inner voice, it's your guide. There's many names for it in different spiritual traditions. That can guide you in a very present state. It can tell you exactly what to do in that moment. And often in a moment of crisis, like Elaine had a crisis. Maybe Elaine, you can just share that story.
Yeah.
If you don't mind.
Just taking my dog and my friend's dog for their regular walk, and I crossed over a busy road and we had a nice time along the beach and so forth. Then when I was coming back, traffic was very busy and fast. So I made sure that they were on a tight lead, watched, cared, made sure that we were well back. Then a Land Rover turned right into the car park, so we couldn't see the oncoming traffic. And I had my gaze onto the Land Rover just for a second. Then when I turned my head, to the middle of the road was my friend's dog. And I just didn't even think, no thoughts were there. I just went straight into the middle of the road and did what I needed to do. And we
got on a lead.
Well, no, I just got the collar. I don't know whether it was instinct or what it was, but there was no thinking. I just didn't even care about my own. Never. There was no thought. I just went straight to the middle of the road.
You're fearless.
There was traffic going very fast. So, the two of us could have been goners. But I managed to do it with my other little dog tucking behind somehow or another. And then all was well. And then when I started walking back, I started thinking about it and starting to think, gosh, if that dog had got killed, my friend would never speak to me again. She would go back to her other country. My mind went silly. So the ego was then in full force, but not while I was doing the action. So
that's speaks exactly to Steve's question. Instinct. Was that instinct, or was that some kind of higher self, Holy Spirit, intuition?
I don't know.
Kicking in and just saying, this is what you need to do now. Well, the way you know this is there's no thinking. Mind.
There was none. No, I just
thought.
went.
You just act. There's that Nike saying, just do it. So it's pure action, just coming from a clean awareness. There's no thought. There's certainly no fear.
No, there was nothing
in that moment. So it's just like somehow you know what to do.
Yeah.
And then you just do it. And so you're in that state. You're in a selfless state of mind. There's no consciousness of self.
No, there was no thinking.
Going, but Elaine, you could get hurt. Don't go into the road because you could get run over. Just like, right, there's a being in need here that could get hurt, and I can do something about it. So I'll do something about it. And you just act in that moment.
Right.
And that is, what we call the Holy Spirit, because there's no thought, there's no analysis, there's no fear.
No.
It's just a present. You can't just know what it is to do, and it goes beyond conscious thought. You didn't go, Elaine, I think you should go and get. You're not telling yourself a story, are you? It's just right. I need to move, and you go and you do it.
Yeah.
And so that's your higher self, or your intuition kicking in. And often in these kinds of moments of crisis and danger, that's what happens. You become very present. The thinking mind goes away because of the apparent danger, and it's just you just do it, and that's actually a very effective mode of operation. So sportsmen, and these extreme sportsmen especially, they get into that state. That's why they do the extreme sport. So they're skydiving, or they cliff jumping, or whatever it is. And in that moment, they're purely present. And that's why they do it. Because there's no awareness of danger, they're fearless, and that is a happy, peaceful state of mind, even when they're in intense action. So why do they, like, let's take rock climbers as an example, free climbers. Why do they do it? I mean, they could die, because they have to be so present when they do it that it puts them into a zone, and they love the feeling. It's like, I feel alive. I feel present to my own true awareness, and it's coming through in my actions, and that feels really good. So that's why they do it. It's even though they could lose their life, but they do it because that state is high. It's like, I feel very pleasurable.
It's down single track, which is one of our passion. They function on a bicycle, a very narrow track. I'm not very skilled, but you have a lot of experience, and you learn how to do it. And there's something about it which all the time you are on track. It's not even, you're not going to stop and question the danger of what you get. And the result is that when you get to the end of a run like that, there's this deep breathing sigh of relief, and people say things like, I've been somewhere where it was absolutely wonderful to go, and at no stage did I make any calculations about it. It was because I've been doing it for years, and I just instinct. I would put that down as instinct.
Well, is it instinct? So I mean, it's words again. It's language. So maybe you could call it instinct. But instinct tends to be more primal. Instinct tends to be more like fight or flight. Your instinct is react in a fight or flight way. But that transcends that. It's not fight or flight, is it?
Well, you're on the edge, Jono, and
but there's no fear, is there, in that state? Yes. So it's not the instinct. The primal instinct that's rooted in our amygdala, which is a primal brain, is a fight or flight. So something happens, there's a danger, and you feel that shot of cortisol, adrenaline, and it's like you tighten up, and then it's like it's a surge of energy. And the idea is that this is, you're going to do this to run or you're going to fight. But that isn't the optimal state of mind to actually address whatever the problem is. Even if it was a life-threatening situation, someone's attacking you or whatever, if you're in that zone, you're going to be much more effective because there's no fear.
You actually practice to get into that zone. You want to be in that zone.
Yeah.
And so because only in that zone does this joy and this pleasure, this mindless joy and pleasure, I call it, because then you can't think about it. You're just there. And being there is a good place to be, I think.
Exactly. So it brings you into this is the essence of the flow state, you see? So it brings you into the present moment. And in that present moment, you're aware of this deeper awareness that you are. And it's just flowing through without all the mind chatter. There's just the awareness coming through, and it's coming through in action. That's what flow is. It's a deeper awareness coming through in your action and your words, if words are even necessary. Often, words aren't even required. You just do it. And it feels like we're alive. It feels we're on a high. It's a heightened state of awareness that, as Steve said, is very pleasurable. And so that's why people do extreme sports and things, because it puts them into that zone. The thing is, you can actually have that all the time. It is possible. You don't necessarily have to do extreme sports. You can live in that state. You could be, we were walking on the beach today. I went for a run. You can just be zoned in all the time. So your life becomes a moving meditation. And that's the point. And so when Paul, in the Bible, there's that saying Paul said in one of the Gospels, you should pray without ceasing. And so a lot of people sort of interpret that as, okay, well, you're going around saying holy prayers all the time, but that's not what he meant. What he meant is that your mind is in a state of communion with your source, and you're continuously connected to that. And so you're praying, communing with source continuously. In other words, you're in a state of flow continuously, and that becomes your prayer to the divine. Your life becomes your prayer to the divine, to this deeper awareness, because it's coming through you continuously, and then it is guiding your thoughts and your words and your actions, and it's doing it for you. So there's no longer a separate self that's going, oh, should I do that? Should I do that? And the separate self, because it's not true, is always going to be fearful, and it's always going to second guess. And that kind of clear, clean action is not possible for it. It's always equivocating and ambiguous. So the ego can't get you into the zone, into that flow state. You have to transcend it to get into flow.
My revelation, I'm sorry to hop on this mountain biking.
Okay.
But the moment you think,
Still can't hear, Steve.
the moment you think all is lost, you can't consider it something separate from your existence. And so writing these, as I used to be writing these quite sort of heavy mountain biking tips, you would come across, you'd have a narrow escape or something like that, and then you might as well stop and get off the bike, because you're thinking of coming taking over the whole situation and the perception of danger that goes with it. Only when you think.
Can you not hear that? I'm just,
Very difficult to hear, Steve. Yeah.
I think maybe that's because we got a different speaker going on. Let me just try.
I think a little bit I can hear, but not
Say
sufficiently.
something now. I've changed the speaker.
Elaine, what I'm talking
Is that
about.
better?
Ah, yes, better. Thank you.
Oh, I've just changed the microphone. For
So I
some
don't need
reason
to
it
say what
wasn't
I was
using
talking
this.
about, because now you know what I'm talking about.
And if it's like here, is that okay? Because my arm
Yeah,
getting
that's
close.
fine there. That's fine. Yes. Yeah.
Can you hear now?
Yeah.
Basically, what I'm saying is that the thrill. I call it. To me, it was a thrill, but the word thrill is applied afterwards, because you're so focused on what you're doing that you can't define it in any way at all. That's just where you are and what you are. And the moment you arrest that natural flow, flow is a good word. The moment you arrest it by bringing thought into it, you might as well stop and get off the bike, because that flow has been completely disturbed and interrupted, and you'll have to start again at the top and do the same downward journey. It's thinking. I have reservations about thinking. It's
I love it.
Drives me crazy.
no.
Well, the thinking mind is problematic.
When I'm talking about instinct, for example, I don't see instinct having any relationship at all with thinking. The heart is more likely to be involved with it than the head, and to me that's just joy, pure joy. I'm quite fond of joy.
Yeah, well, I mean, these are ancient principles. The idea of flow is not a new idea. It's a modern psychological concept that a guy called Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi coined, but it goes back 2,500 years, probably longer. But the master Lao Tzu, who was the founder of Taoism, he wrote the Tao Te Ching, and that little book, a fabulous book, I can highly recommend reading it, is all about the flow.
Yeah,
it's about the Tao, which is the source coming in and flowing in and through you into your life. And so this is very ancient teaching, 2,500 years, and he would have got it from. It preceded that. It's as long as human beings have been conscious and aware that this idea of being in the flow with a source, a spirit, whatever you want to call it, Tao, spirit, source, has been the quest. Everyone's like, well, we know that there's suffering There's a dissatisfaction, as the Buddha called it, in life. But the antidote to that is connecting with this, higher source, and allowing that to come through, and being in that state when you're living your life, and it feels good, it feels joyful, it feels happy.
If I may, I think the warrior archetype plays a part in that in many respects as well. We have the horror of conflict, military and one thing and another, and it just seems so utterly bizarre and pointless. But for a warrior who's been trained in his or her skill, that flow is what makes it worthwhile. They quite content to be a warrior and to dedicate themselves to this military service, because that brings them into that place of immediacy.
Yeah, you could find it in combat, for sure.
Yes.
And you can find it in any, often extreme situations, put you into that state, because it's an altered state. The mind sort of gets taken there by the situation. But you can learn to be in flow in your daily life when there's no drama, there's no crisis. You just you know how to stay in that state. And the key thing is to be able to let go of the negative thoughts and emotions that come up, thinking mode. That's key, because if that comes in, that breaks the flow. And what you're doing then is you're disconnecting from your source when you do that. So the thinking mind that fears and worries and goes into the past and the future disconnects you from that deeper awareness, and then the flow is broken. You can't stay in flow when all that really useless thought is going on. So this is why the art of letting go is so important, or forgiveness, whatever you want to call it. But I prefer calling it letting go, because you must let go of those negative thoughts and emotions that come in and sabotage that. Otherwise, you can't access flow. And flow is just another name for miracles. It took me a long time to figure this out, like 10 years. It was a bit slow on uptake, but it's the same thing. When he's talking about miracles, he's not talking about turning water into wine or raising the dead or doing any of the, what we think of as miracles, because we all, read the New Testament and Jesus's miracles. That's the common misperception of what a miracle is. I'm not saying phenomenal things aren't possible, but actually the miracle is just being in the flow with life. So you go for a walk on the beach and the thinking mind stops and you're just enjoying it, and it's a pleasant experience. Now that's a miracle.
Yeah.
And then you come back and you had a little drama because the garden. So then can you let that go and go, no, it's okay. It's okay. There's no thinking mind doesn't enter, which you probably found difficult because the thinking mind went, oh, and then there's guilt. But okay, now the miracle then is to let that go and return your mind into the flow state. So it's okay. Like actually it all worked out all right. You apologize for the gardener and you buy him a cool drink at Pick and Pay, and it's all okay and it's flowing, you see. And then there's not the guilt. You see, the problem is the guilt, isn't it? So, I messed up and I caused him suffering, but you got to drop that and just go, but it is what it is, right? Yes, I was apparently half an hour late. He was waiting for half an hour, but it's pointless to have guilt about it. Does it serve any purpose? It doesn't make you unlate.
It worked itself out, yes.
Yeah.
It was
So if you
fine.
can let go, then you re-enter the flow, and then it's very temporary. That irritation and that, what the ego is trying to do is take you out of flow, then just you don't allow it to come in and really hijack your mind and take you out of the flow. Whereas, most people, if they're untrained, they don't have that capacity. Something happens and then they get irritated and they can stay there for hours, maybe days. And if it becomes chronic, that becomes their default state. They're just always irritated.
Day this afternoon, in that you were going to run from the beach to the house.
Yeah.
And you didn't have your cell phone and you didn't have a map, and you were just following my directions. And I was watching my time. And you should have been here in half an hour. An hour had gone by. My mind was going into, you probably run up Chapman's Peak and you got lost, or you got hit by a car, and I went into panic.
Really interesting.
And
Okay.
he can't phone. If something happens to him, he can't phone.
Yeah.
If he's lost, he can't phone anyone.
Oh, yeah.
And I was thinking, well, you're in the flow because you're doing the run which you wanted to do.
Hmm.
And I watched myself getting into such a state, like a mother and a child,
Yeah.
that I phoned Steve and I said, he hasn't come.
What time was this? Like 5 o'clock or something?
5:15, yes, because I worked it out 3:30. We left you.
Yeah, but you didn't know how long I was going to be on the beach.
No, I didn't.
So you were just creating a drama.
So I phoned Steve and he
Yeah.
says to me, don't worry, he's gone for an extra long run. He's a fit guy.
Yeah.
He's running, he'll be fine. Don't
Yeah.
worry.
Yeah. Yeah.
But all those things, we were talking about soldiers and military situations. Not that I know anything at all about it really, but the martial arts are strictly on those things. Jiu-jitsu and karate and all those kind of things. Those guys are not stopping and thinking at any stage. They've just been training to respond and react in certain situations. And the more practice they've had, the better they become at it. And I suppose that can be applied to other aspects of life as well. It's
Just let it go, let it go.
Well, shall I tell you a story in that context?
Okay.
I think you've probably heard it. But there was this, you know, the martial art called Aikido.
yes.
Yeah. So Aikido, you can't punch or kick. You only use the opponent's force.
Yes.
So you just redirect whatever, an attack gets redirected, and there's no possibility in Aikido of attacking someone. You can't use it for attack, whereas the others you can. So this Aikido master, when he was young, he's in his 20s or something, and he's like, no, I really want to use my Aikido. His ego is like, really want to use it. And he's looking for a situation to use it. So then he's on a train in Tokyo, and this big kind of brutish laborer who's drunk out of his mind on sake comes into the train, and he's uncouth and he's smelly and he's angry, he's aggressive, and he wants to hurt people. And so he goes, okay, this is my chance, right? He's about to get up and take the guy on using his Aikido skills. And then this little old man pops up. He's sitting on the train, and he says some arbitrary, like, how's the weather today? To interrupt his pattern. And the laborer's like, what? And so the guy's like, geez, I better go rescue him because he's about to get smashed.
Yeah.
And then he just watches this old man, and he just talks, just his voice, and he's very gentle and he's very kind, and he just gets the story of this brutish laborer, and he gets him to share his story. Why he's so upset? No, it's because his wife's left him, and he feels abandoned and he feels alone. And by the end of it, after like 10, 15 minutes, the laborer is lying in the guy's lap, and he's stroking his head. And then he goes, the Aikido master said, okay, that was Aikido.
Yeah.
See, he didn't even need to fight.
Yeah.
He just did it with his mind, and he let go, and he wasn't fearful, and he used loving kindness to defuse that guy's angry state and bring him into a state of total submission. He's like lying there just having his head stroked. So that's the true art. It's like, can you let go and be so present and skillful in your words and your actions that this higher awareness, the Holy Spirit, comes through in loving kindness in a way that is quite miraculous. Like, that was a miracle. Like, surely that wouldn't be possible, but you showed it was.
I think the martial arts expect the greater practitioners of it are not expected to get into fights.
Yeah, the whole point is you don't fight.
Yes.
You're so skilled that you don't need to fight, but you're just so present. I heard this story, I don't know if it's true, but there was a guy in Thailand, he was a karate or judo or something, black belt. And so these thugs come up, there's a bunch of, 3 or 4 of them, and they've got knives. And so he's so present, and he's so like in his power. He says, okay, guys, yeah, we can do this if you want, but I'm black belt karate, 3rd dan, whatever. So you will get hurt. You'll get hurt. I'll get hurt, but we can do this if you want. Or you could just turn around and go home. And they did, because he's so, he's just so present.
Yes.
And
yes.
so calm that they're like, whoa, that's totally not what they expected. And so you break the pattern, you interrupt the pattern of the normal. Oh, now I'm a victim and I'm scared. That's what they're expecting. And that's mental. That's a mind training. So the martial arts are just another spiritual practice, really. Another way of finding a way into that aligned, connected state, and training you to stay present to that, even when you're in dynamic action, or you've got a threat or something coming along. So it's all mind training. All these disciplines are actually training the mind, not so much the body. And the highest practitioners of the martial arts become very spiritual. It becomes a path to enlightenment ultimately.
It's actually it makes one think. Wouldn't it be a good idea at schools to have that as a subject at school rather than some of the other stuff? And a lot of the students who are drawn in that direction would warm to it particularly and become quite exceptional practitioners of the skills involved. But instead they try and teach you things like mathematics and
numbers.
Yeah.
Well, they can be useful in today's world, but
Yeah.
I hear what you're saying. I mean, if you look at the education system, isn't it insane that we never teach children about awareness or consciousness?
Yes.
It's the fundamental thing, right? Who are you? What's your awareness?
Yes.
There's no subject in school because that's absolutely fundamental. Like everything's happening in your consciousness or awareness. And there's a difference between those. We won't get into that today. But so why don't we teach people about that awareness and how to direct that awareness, how to direct their attention and train that awareness so that if they're studying whatever, mathematics or martial arts or any subject, they're much more present. They'll be much better learners because they know how to manage their mind. We never train them in that. And some kids just kind of get it, they're lucky, and others don't have a clue and they don't get it. And then they're slow learners, but there's no subject to train them.
Are you teaching your son this?
Yeah. Not formally because he's only 8, but you drop it in there.
He came onto the screen on his birthday and he said, "I love you."
Yeah, he did. Yeah.
Did you prompt him?
No. He just said that. I said, what love is all there is or something. What did he say? I sent that little clip to that. So
yeah, the education thing is an issue. Allow it to be an issue. My own experience was so unsuccessful as a schoolboy. And the main reason that I can see in it now was boredom. I really, I would much rather have gone out drinking and brawling and things like that, and missing school and that, because I was alive when I did that. But to sit in that grey, mundane atmosphere, which was called education, and which you had to do to make something of your life. I didn't make anything of my life, but in any case, at least I had more fun.
Oh, it sounds like you had an interesting and rich life. So
he had a lawyer for a father who was trying to
get him into law
a box.
And yeah.
You
didn't follow. Yeah. Well, that's I resonate to that.
There's no blame anywhere. It's you deal with it. There's a lovely Zen story. I think that I heard it. No one else seems to have heard it. I'm sorry. Is it okay to talk about that now?
Yeah.
Okay.
The discussion. Yeah.
There's
interesting.
There was.
Can you hear okay, then? Just to check. Can you hear? You can hear. Good.
There was a story that I heard was about medieval Japan, when it was very divided into different sort of principalities of power and order, and the various shoguns or hotshot guys ran their own little area of the country as an army. And this included the Buddhist monks. The Buddhist monks were all, to some extent, given a military background, and they had the capacity to, which the Japanese seem to have from time to time, to be a little unpleasant about disputes. And what happened was that the chap next door, one guy next door to another one, had designs on this chap's land, and he got his he had his followers ready to invade. I mean, it's quite Putinesque actually in many respects, and the land he was invading was mainly occupied by a quite profound Buddhist group, and they centered their activities and their lives on their main temple. And the abbot of this main temple was historically a well-renowned person in this way, and it was a place where people wanted to be for the growth and development that they would get there. But unfortunately, their next door neighbor didn't have those same high ideals, and he sent his troops in to invade this next door country where the abbot and his merry men were hanging out. And the rumors started reaching the abbot and his monks that trouble was coming, and they weren't in a situation to deal with it. They looked out and they could see this army of ragtag, mercenary type of Japanese warriors and soldiers heading towards them, carrying burning torches and tapers and things like that. And clearly their design was to destroy this this temple and all the people in it. And it didn't look good, because it wasn't good. And the story that I heard was that at the height of it, the thugs got across the border and started throwing their burning tapers and things onto the thatched roof of this beautiful temple, which caught fire and was burning fiercely with all the monks and the abbot inside. And while this was happening, apparently some of the locals, which is a pretty common universal thing, were parked up on the hills watching with interest. But at a certain stage, this temple, all wood and thatch, was burning fiercely, and packed with all the monks and with the abbot. And apparently the front doors of this temple were made out of beautiful, thick, solid wood. And at a certain stage, double doors, big double doors, swung open. And there was the abbot standing there, his clothing starting to smolder and burn. And it looked, as it was, in fact, like the end was near. And the abbot apparently threw his hands out wide like this, and he shouted out loud so everyone could hear two words that to me made such an impression on me. He just shouted out, "No blame." And that was a turning point in my life, hearing that story. There is no blame. You know, it's not somebody's fault. This is what happens. And the abbot knew how to deal with it. He accepted it, and he just said there was no blame.
Did the temple burn down?
Yes, let the temple burn down, and he died, and they died. They all died. But what options were there? And by capturing it in those two words, no blame, I think his defense of the truth was far greater than any other in a situation of similar direness. So that's. Whenever I get an opportunity, I'll tell that story. Sorry about that, chaps.
Well, no, it's a good story.
It's just that
it just shows you the principle is universal, because Yeshua, Jesus, most people know, but I call him Yeshua because that actually was his name. in the crucifixion, there's that immortal saying, forgive them, Father, if they don't know what they do.
Yes.
Same idea.
Yeah,
okay, no blame. I just
Yes.
they don't know what they're doing.
Yes.
But I'm actually asking for them to be forgiven. I'm not blaming. I'm not condemning them. So from two different spiritual paths,
Yes.
you have really the same message,
Absolutely.
which points to a universal truth. Right?
Yeah.
Don't blame, don't condemn. Even if they're killing you. In both instances, there was attack and there was murder going on. But to go there, to go into blame and hatred, is to deny the truth about you. So even if your body's dying, you remain centered in your truth.
It doesn't have to be as dire as that. In everyday aspects of life, there's this tendency to try and find someone to blame or something to blame, and it's a cowardly approach, I think, to not accept your own involvement in existence, and to try and find somebody else's fault. And anyway, I happily haven't had any major experiences like that. I'll just do it about other people's.
Well, it's a projection of, we'll speak to that actually. Let me just share my screen.
I'm sorry, as Chrissy always says to me, I talk too much.
No, it's great. It's nice, really nice. This is what a discussion is. It's interesting stories, and the course comes alive in the stories, not just dry theory. It's like, okay, well, this is actually, practically applicable. And you start to see the different paths all teaching the same thing. Okay, so I'm just going to share my screen. This is relevant, so share. So this is what I was sketching out on Sunday, but it's a lot neater. It's typed. So this explains the reason why there's such a tendency for people to blame, because the guilt and the sin that we experience for the apparent sin of destroying love. In order to be an individual identity, we have to have destroyed God or love or oneness or pure formless awareness. So we then experience this tremendous guilt at what we think we've done. We haven't really done it, because you can't actually do it. You can't destroy that. It's indestructible. But we think we've done it, so that's the problem. So now that guilt and that sin, the ego doesn't know how to. Well, it's overwhelming and it's painful. So what it seeks to do then is to project it out. It says, it's not me then who's done this. I'm not the guilty one. Someone else is the guilty. And that's what blame is. I'm blaming someone else, so I offload my guilt onto them, and then I feel a little bit better about myself, temporarily. Because they are the ones who are guilty. They are the ones who are going to be punished, because guilt demands punishment. False expectation of punishment appearing real. They're the ones now who are going to be punished, not me. And so it's a very childish device of the ego to try and offload the guilt onto someone else, which doesn't work, because the more that if I give you something, what am I saying? If I keep giving you something, I must have lots of it to give.
Yes.
So if I keep giving you blame, which is giving you guilt,
yes,
I'm really saying to my own mind that I have lots of guilt to give.
Yes. You're well endowed.
I'm well endowed with guilt. And so it doesn't remove the guilt, it makes the guilt worse.
Yes.
So you keep blaming and trying to get rid of the guilt that way.
Yes.
But it doesn't work. But the ego is fanatical and obsessed, so it'll keep trying to do that.
It's universally applicable in every aspect of life. It wasn't me.
Yeah.
I know from experience. Somebody used to poison the tadpoles in the one of the teachers had in the lab, and this teacher, Champion was his name, would get terribly upset and start fuming and things like that. And he would ask that with the boys who did this, please own up, and then there would be no trouble about it. They never owned up, but I start blushing. I start blushing immediately and perspiring as if I had done it.
Interesting.
And that was the sort of thing that would happen to me. I don't know how that came into play.
It was guilt.
It was guilt, but yes,
Even though you hadn't done it.
yes,
Yeah.
yes.
But there was a feeling that maybe you could be blamed, or and guilt is a very destructive emotion.
Yes,
We feel
yes.
guilt, and then
It must have been guilt, Jono. You're right. Yes.
What do we do because of guilt? Well, we fear, we attack, we hate, we do all kinds of unconscious things because we feel guilty, and we want to somehow get rid of that feeling. And so Yeshua is saying to us, look, the only way of getting rid of that feeling is getting rid of the feeling. It's very simple. Well, drop the feeling, but if you understand, it requires a little bit of thought that goes with it. But this is inspired thought. If you understand that this never happened, you never actually did this. You never actually did destroy God or love or oneness or pure formless awareness. It's not possible. But it never really happened. Then you can go, okay, well, thank goodness, I'm not guilty of anything. No one's guilty of anything because it never really happened.
But the potential, the capacity that the individual guiltless person still has to feel guilt is something which seems to be ingrained.
That's the ego.
Yes, yes.
So the ego continues to exist because it tells you that you're guilty of this terrible crime of destroying love, and as long as you feel that guilt, you identify with yourself as an individual entity, an individual person with your own identity. So guilt and sin are the underpinnings of individuality, and then they lead to really a disaster. Guilt and sin lead to fear and attack and hatred and anger. I mean, every negative thought and emotion can be tracked back to guilt, and then you go a step higher in the ladder, and you see that that's the idea of separation. Separation leads to guilt. Guilt and sin lead to fear. Fear leads to attack thoughts, and now you're caught up in really what's a nightmare by comparison with what you came from.
Your potential to do all of that as well. By the way, should you wish to poison tadpoles, Condy's crystals is recommended.
Like he did it.
No,
I just knew how it was done.
I just knew how it was done.
Yeah. Well, I don't think I'll be poisoning tadpoles, but
the guys who did it in the classroom milieu in that environment were kind of heroic figures, rebels who were taking on the system, which was so dull and boring anyway. And making a strong statement against it by killing poor old champions, tadpoles.
Poor tadpoles, yeah. But this is how resistance happens. So the guilt and the sin are the problem, and we have to let go of the guilt and the sin in order to be free.
Yes, yes.
There's no other way.
Yes.
And the guilt and the sin manifest, and like today's lesson is all about grievances, and like yesterday's also, they come in the form of grievances. So if I have a grievance against you and I'm blaming you, I'm giving you guilt. I'm perpetuating this thought system of guilt. I'm perpetuating my separate identity, and there's no hope in that. If you keep doing that, then you're a separate entity. You're feeling guilty. You're trying to project your guilt onto someone else and blame them. And it's really disturbing to your peace of mind. And you will do hurtful things to yourself and others in that state of mind. So when that happens and you find the guilt arising, just be aware of it. Okay, but I'm not guilty of anything.
I'm innocent.
I'm innocent. It never really happened. See? And that's the way out of anything. It never really happened. Because right now, in this present moment, there's nothing to be guilty for. Right now, is there anything to be guilty for? No. So it brings you into the pure present moment, which is the same moment we talked about with flow. It brings you into that moment of pure awareness where everything's fine, everything's okay. And then if you can stay there, you enter the flow of life without guilt sabotaging it. But if you have guilt, people who walk around with guilt do unkind, nasty things a lot, and they also damage themselves. So every illness, every disease is self-punishment. You're punishing yourself.
At the same time, John, please forgive me if I'm sounding difficult, but it's necessary to realize that there are compensatory elements that deal with all of these things. So, for example, the fact that I didn't poison the tadpoles, but had the guilt and the associations with it, might be what made me very much keen on protecting tadpoles ever since, and encouraging frogs to make themselves comfortable at my premises. It's a compensatory element, and so quite often the guilt thing is replaced by that realization, and people, for example, people who are cruel to animals, and when it's pointed out to them, they could well become campaigners for animal rights. Because
there's nothing so zealous as a convert.
Absolutely.
So Paul was a good example of that. The Apostle Paul, because he was intent on wiping the Christians out. He's going to condemn them, and then he has this kind of epiphany on the road to Damascus, and his eyes are literally open. He goes blind, and then his eyes are open, and it's like, oh wow, now I become the greatest convert. Zealous. Beyond what any of the other disciples were, it seems. Maybe as a compensatory mechanism.
He had to kill a lot of Christians before before then.
But then he was trying to make good.
So
he was then trying to redeem himself. So there's redemption for everyone. Guilt is never permanent. If you can just realize that you're not condemned. Because none of it ever happened. None of it's real. So spirit or pure formless awareness doesn't condemn you. It never condemns anyone, because it doesn't know about condemnation. It only knows about love, unconditional love. So we just have to accept that. It's the hardest thing for a human being to do, to just say I'm not guilty. And I've never messed up, and no one's ever messed up. Because your mind goes, but hang on, I've done this and I've done this, and that person's done that and done that. And then the thinking mind that gets engaged in all of that and becomes past, future. And this awareness is covered over. But you see how that works. So this is a construct. The whole point of it is to cover this over, so you're not aware of it. So now you get caught up. You get caught up in the guilt and the sin and the fear and the attack, and a nightmare of increased guilt, fear, attack, projection of guilt in the form of accusation, blame, and complaint, the ABC, or accusation, blame, and counterattack. And you believe that you're a victim of all of this. So this is all happening to you, and life's very unfair, and the world and the people against you, but without realizing that you've set up the whole scenario, because you believed in separation and you believed in guilt and sin, and therefore, if you do that, the consequences are a given. You are going to have fear, you're going to have attack, you're going to have to project it out. So you're going to be caught up in these games of guilt, fear, attack, accusation, blame, and complaint or counterattack. Are very, these are the language of the ego: accuse, blame, and complain. And life is relatively a nightmare. By comparison to this, it's horrible. So the way out of that is to simply recognize that none of that is true. You never did separate. The guilt is not real. The fear is not real. None of it's ever really happened. You're not really an individual person living in this cruel world. Actually, you're still pure formless awareness of perfect love, and that's still the truth about you. A very, very simple truth, but to remember it in the heat of the moment is why we do the spiritual practice and mind training. Because in the heat of the moment, you go, oh, the guilt kicks in, and I want to get irritated, and I want to get angry, and I want to project it. And then you have to bring yourself back. The Holy Spirit says, no, don't go there. Because if you go there, what you're saying is all of this is real. The separation's real, all of this is real, and you make the entire disaster of the ego's thought system real in that moment. So all the guilt, the sin, the fear, the pain, the suffering, the sickness, the death that have ever happened, seemingly happened in this world, now become your reality. So it's a horror show. It's hell.
But John, it happens. People are being killed and butchered, and
or are they? You know, so that's the question. They'd be in a dream.
Yes.
This is where the illusion idea comes.
Yes.
In a dream, yes, the body can be killed, but that's not who they really are. The body is an illusion.
Yes.
And the mind that thinks that those things are real and that perpetrates those things is also an illusion. It's all illusory. So no one's really dying. No one's really suffering. It just appears to be that way. Actually, in truth, their awareness, their absolute, pure, what we call pure formless awareness or spirit is untouched by any of that at the fundamental level. So no one can really die. No one can really kill you. You can't be killed. You can't be harmed. And, it's to remain in that place of still calm awareness, even when that's seemingly happening, like the Abbot did and like Yeshua did.
Yes.
That's advanced spiritual understanding.
Yes.
So they don't lose the awareness of this awareness. They're in a high enough state of mind to say, I'm still there, even though, my death is upon me, the body is now dying. I don't deny my true awareness.
There are still problems. That young man that was at my place the other day, Carl, that I think have drawn attention to, that for the mother of some victim of this kind of thing, it's going to be quite hard to persuade that mother
to let go.
Yes.
Of course, because she's attached to the individual identity of her son or her daughter.
Yes.
And her own identity.
Yes.
So to truly forgive that, she would have to let go of her own self-concept as a mother of that child and all of that identification, all that attachment.
It is a big ask, though, John.
It is, but that's the way.
Yeah.
And it has been done. There are people in those extreme situations who have let go, and they have found, it's called the grace of God. By the grace of God, not by my own will, but thy will be done.
Yeah.
That it's possible. There was actually a chap, great example. You remember I shared that video during the course of that Muslim imam. Did you ever watch that video with Morgan Freeman? Yeah. So there was this Muslim. He was kind of a quite spiritual in his Islamic faith. So not the radical fundamentalist who let's kill everyone in a holy jihad. Actually, genuinely kind, loving, compassionate, because actually that's what it says in the Quran. Mercy. The fundamental, I think the first principle was mercy, which is loving kindness. So his son was killed. He was a pizza delivery man, and he was killed by some thugs. And he forgave. And I've seen the video. I'll show it to you. Of him in the courtroom saying to the guy who killed the murderer of his son, he's saying, I feel sorry for you. My heart is compassionate for you because I'm sorry that this had to happen to you, that you now have to go to prison for the rest of your life, and that you're obviously in a bit of a predicament here. This is because you killed my son. And I know that you didn't really do it. It was the ego that made you do it. And then he hugged him. He actually embraced him. He said, yeah, you are like my son. And you just see everyone just cracking up. The judge is like, okay, I think we need a recess now. Just because the extent of that forgiveness, not to blame in that situation, not to go, you're the murderer and you've taken away my son and I just want you to be punished. To say, I perceive you still as you are. You made a mistake seemingly in the dream world, but actually your true awareness, your spirit, your soul is still the same, and it's the same as my soul.
No blame.
No blame, exactly.
Yes.
So he was applying the same principle, and that is absolutely transformational if you can do that, because it drops the whole guilt, sin, blame, condemnation program of the ego, and then you access this divine love, pure formless awareness of perfect love. Yeah, so you reinterpret in an extreme situation like that. So let's say you've had a death, murder of anyone losing their son or daughter or partner is a difficult, the most difficult challenges you could have. But what it offers you the opportunity to do is to let go of your attachment to this world.
Yes.
You let go of the guilt and the sin and the tendency to blame. And if you can learn that lesson, you can actually free your mind. So that's what it's
freedom,
for.
actually.
Yes.
But it's still a big ask, John.
Huh.
It's a big ask.
But it's possible. If you apply these principles. So the Muslim guy, because he dedicated his life to really following the true principles of Islam, which are the same as every religion has the same principles at its core. Divine love, mercy, compassion, unconditional love, really. And he followed that. He was like, well, it wasn't easy, but he knew that I have to follow this path because this is what will save me.
Yes.
If I get angry and I condemn and I allow myself to dwell in those thoughts, it will destroy me. Because hatred is self-consuming. So because he'd had that training, he knew that was the only option, the only way to go.
Yes. Yes.
And he applied it. But it undoes the human self. It undoes the human conditioning, and that's why it's difficult. Because the self, the separate self that identifies itself, himself, herself as a person who has a son, who has the special relationship, who can lose, who can suffer, now has to die in order to do that kind of forgiveness.
Yeah.
And that's the transcendent dimension of any tragedy.
Yes.
That you can collapse, you can let the ego die, and you can come out on the other side, and you come out the other side, and then you are at one. You use that word at one moment on Sunday. You are at one with your source.
It's a key element in so many historic things as well. Because of my background, I think of the Jews that died in the Holocaust in the Second World War, and that so many in the years that came after that, so many of the leaders of Jewish opinion, enlightened Jewish opinion, used the term we can forgive, but we cannot forget. And that's quite an interesting qualification of forgiveness.
No, but it's not true forgiveness, because forgiveness simply says, radical forgiveness says it never really happened. So of course we got to forget it, because as long as we can forgive, but it's what Yeshua calls forgiveness to destroy. It's the ego's version of forgiveness.
Yes.
Because actually they're not forgiving. As long as we remember that and remember the hurt and the pain and all, well, we haven't forgiven because it all comes up again. And now what it does is it clouds our true awareness.
Yes.
And we now go back into that state of hurt and pain and victimhood. And then we separate. Apparently Israel still doesn't trade with Germany. Am I correct?
No, they do now.
Do they?
Yeah, they do now.
But for many years they didn't.
Yes.
And it's to really the radical forgiveness that Yeshua is teaching is completely liberating, because it's saying you can drop it all. There's no remembering of an illusion. You simply recognize that the dream world that you thought you inhabited is just a dream. I mean, the same way, you talked about dreams. We've had that conversation. You were Jungian. Well, what happens when you wake up from the dream? The dream's nowhere. Where's the dream? There's no evidence you ever had the dream. It's just a memory in your mind. Okay, well, I remember I was riding my bike down a mountain, and then I wake up and I'm in completely a different reality. So where's the dream? It was a mental fabrication. It was something going on in your mind alone.
Yes.
So how do we know that this whole illusion that we seem to live in is not just another seemingly more real version of that.
I can't answer that directly, but I know that from years of dreaming, and every morning I would spend a good deal of time writing down my dreams from a conscious state. I've got drawers full of notebooks with my dreams in them, and then I would try to understand the symbolism in that dream. And the dreams in that context, from my own experience as a sort of a not particularly successful Jungian, were that you actually understood why things happened. So the characters in the dream became something much greater than they were in any kind of reality. Their symbolic value was enormous, and they still dominate so much of my life in terms of memories, and I think motivation and stuff like that, and understanding and seeing ahead. I don't want to bore you now, but I mean, I had a cousin, a wonderfully successful man, and he was my father's hero. His name was Norman Adelson, and my father wanted me to be like Norman Adelson. Norman Adelson was good at sport. He was academically bright. He was popular. He got all the ticks and all the boxes. And my dad just wanted to have a son like that. And he got me instead.
Which is his perfect lesson.
Yeah. And for years.
And you were just a rebel. It was like, yeah.
I don't know what I was, John. For years, this spectre, you can say, haunted me, and even after my father died, there was still this barrier because I wasn't what he wanted, And if I may just jump to another thing, I'm going to shut up soon.
Christine laughs. Is that true?
No,
weren't you supposed to be on a call? We abandoned that idea.
I'll listen tomorrow.
Okay.
I was one of the chaps with whom I was at school was a guy called Norman Prentice, and I wasn't close to him. I was an acquaintance. We never had any differences of opinion or anything like that, but he was there, and I clean forgot about him. One night, 30 years later, I dreamed about Norman Prentice, whose father had died in a tragic fishing accident and things like that. But this profound picture of Norman Prentice dominated the whole landscape of my dream. I hadn't given him a thought for 30 odd years. Why am I suddenly dreaming about Norman Prentice? And with my Jungian analyst, we eventually got to the point where we realized that the unconscious, or God, if you like, was trying to get a message across to me that a lot of my conflicts and problems were a result of being Norman's apprentice. My dad had wanted me to be like Norman Adelson, and it had colored and affected my whole life.
Yeah. So you didn't feel like you were good enough.
Yes. And so when that penny dropped, it was quite a relief. I still had plenty of other shit to deal with, but that was a profound insight into the power of dreams. And there were others like that. It was just an amazing adventure. So okay, now I'm shutting up.
Well, so take that to another level. So you don't just learn from your dreams when you're sleeping. You learn from your waking dreams.
Yes.
That's the whole point. If this is all a dream, it's all symbolic.
Yes.
Right? None of it's absolute reality, but it's symbolically pointing us in a direction if we allow it to.
Yes.
So we can learn from it.
Yes.
And then you can start awakening to this deeper awareness, pure formless awareness of perfect love, we call it, through the symbols in your dream world. And that's really what the Holy Spirit is doing. That's its function. It's saying you can analyze, you can become aware of what's going on in the dream world, but from a different perspective. It's a higher perspective. So instead of just the default thought system of the ego go, okay, well, that's happened, that's bad, I'm a victim, and just take it on face value. is to look deeper into it. It's like, so what is it really telling me about myself, my own mind? And so, of course, in miracles, it's just taking the Jungian idea of, well, analyze your dreams to learn from them, to a different level, and saying, but actually analyze the whole dream, because it's all a dream, and everything that shows up in the dream can be looked at differently and perceived differently, and can help you to find your way home back to this state of true awareness.
Unquestionably, I feel so grateful to have had that experience, and with other dreams, I won't go into it now, but it was, you talk about the Holy Spirit. We're talking about something which knows everything, and that's the key to it. That you think you have an understanding of what's going on around you, but and some of the characters that play their part in it might be familiar or worth considering, but ultimately there's something else. And that's the key to it. And that something else is that which gives one an opportunity for growth and development. And I get cold shivers when I think about that sort of thing. And I wasn't a great success in spite of all of that, though. And
well, so it's interesting, because what's success?
Yes, no, we talked about that the other day as well.
Is success, success achieving things that the world esteems as worthwhile? So your father would have been, a great success. Top law firm.
That's why I
good law student, top law firm. But that's not really success, because you wouldn't have really lived your own truth. It's not a successful life at all. So,
but as a young man, Jono, a teenager and things like that, you find yourself in a world where other people's expectations and the mode of your culture weigh so heavily that it becomes quite natural to respond to that kind of thing.
Well, most people do, but the heroes of the world don't. They take a different path. So you avoided that. So did I. So did father. It was like, no, you need to follow the track, follow the normal way. And I'm like, no, that's not going to happen.
Yeah.
Because something in me was saying, if I do that, I'll lose my soul. And I couldn't allow that.
Yes.
So I had to do everything that he didn't want me to do.
Yeah.
So you become the polar opposite then.
Well,
so that's helpful, actually. Your father helped you.
Very helpful, because I'm so glad
yourself.
that I found it by way of delinquency. That at school, the friends I made, as soon as my mind was more or less ripening, were all of the same ilk. They were all delinquents, they were all rebels, and they lived their lives richly and fully. And what a privilege it was for me to abdicate from the role that had been designed for me, and to become this useless gangster, this delinquent, wandering around drinking and falling about and things like that. I try and explain to people how lucky I was to have that. Chrissy won't let me say it around her grandchildren.
Well, it set you free from the program, didn't it?
Yes.
It was like, okay, so you didn't do that all your life. You actually did find a way to be a bit more respectable. But it was your own way. You'd found a path that wasn't being dictated to you by a father who represented a thought system.
Yes.
See? It's the convention of society that the father then represents, and that's a false god. What you're honoring then is a false.
But there is something within you. There is always this potential within you to escape from that image. And so when Chrissy gets upset when I talk about it with her grandchildren around and things like that, I'm not ashamed of anything. Not a blessed thing. I was. It all worked out so bloody well. And it's another dream I had. I've worked on as a journalist with a guy from Farmers Weekly who was very keen on cattle, and his favorite breed of cattle were Herefords. It's a very handsome animal, a Hereford cow, and a Hereford bull is utterly exquisite in its own special way. And I used to travel with him through the Eastern Cape. I was looking for common news stories, and this guy, Jimmy was his name, was looking for agricultural stories. And he was so passionate about Hereford cattle that if we went past any farm where he saw Herefords grazing in the distance, we would go in and meet the farmer and talk to him, and he would wax lyrical about this wonderful breed of cattle, the Herefords, and it rubbed off on me. And to cut into it, as I do from time to time, my wife, Kay, was not Jewish. And at the time when the two of us became a couple, it was still not at all cool or fashionable for a Jewish boy to hang around with shiksas, we used to call them, Gentile women.
Christian.
Kay was never a Christian, but she wasn't
Jewish. No.
She wasn't Jewish, and attempts were made to get her to convert, and everything like that. And pressure was put on me to try and persuade her to convert to Judaism. And I said with some difficulty that I can't do that. I can't make someone into something that they're not. And but the pressure was kept on members of the family, and I was slowly moved out of the
inner circle.
Inner circle, yes. And then and although
the black sheep of the Jewish family.
Yes, and although it was I learned to live with it, and Kay was wonderful. She was the most wonderful woman, and in many respects more Jewish than most of the Jewish girls I knew. And but I made so bold as to say early on that I wasn't going to be caught up in that kind of prediction, you know, expectancy that that I was a total sinner because I'd fallen in love with a girl who wasn't Jewish, and we had this pretty decent marriage as well. But I was able to convince myself to a degree that it was okay, that I'd come to terms with it all. And then one night I had a dream, and in this dream there appeared a Hereford bull. That's what happened, guys. A pure white Hereford bull. You don't get pure white Hereford bulls. Right. The most exquisite animal you've ever seen, and it dominated. It was like on a sort of sensory-round screen, just boing, 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 and eventually I took this image to my Jungian analyst, who was a charming and delightful man, and we talked about it for a bit, and then eventually the penny dropped. The Hereford bull was me. I was the result of thousands of years of selective breeding to keep the race pure, right. The Jews. Okay. And here's this. So I was this pure white Hereford bull. The next thing you know, I'm mating with a Jersey cow.
You got to laugh.
No, but I mean that's the magic.
What happened in the dream.
That's the magic. That's the dream. That's the magic of it, Jono.
Yeah, I get it.
It's so fucking bang on, you know.
Literally.
Yes. And I felt so. I kind of felt chosen to be able to receive that kind of information. Yeah, you know? And there were others like that as well. Yeah. Oh, I'm going. It's enough now. Because he's going to give me help.
No, I think it's going to be highly entertaining for everyone.
No, I'm not doing it to entertain. I'm doing it because to me it's profound.
Christine's like crying. She's laughing so much. Elaine, I hope this is entertaining. But let's crack on, shall we? So we have a look at our our email for today. Let's see if we can bring that up. But thank you, Steve. It's a breath of fresh air.
Yeah, I overdo it a bit, John.
No, it's all good. It's all good. It's lovely to
spontaneous.
Lovely to have some humor. I think can all get serious sometimes. All right. So what are we doing? Let's zoom this in. Okay, let's stop that recording. So there was a long discussion, but it was very fruitful. So it was a bang-on discussion. We hit the bullseye. You got to laugh. Okay, so let's ask Elaine to read, because you've been very quiet tonight, Elaine. So if you can read that quote for us, kindly.
Yeah. Every grievance you hold hides a little more of the light of the world from your eyes until the darkness becomes overwhelming. Everything you forgive restores that light. So ask yourself, who is it that you are really hurting?
Very quote, isn't it? Every grievance you hold hides a little more of the light of the world from your eyes until the darkness becomes overwhelming.
Yeah.
Everything you forgive or let go of, in our language, we said everything you let go of restores that light.
Yeah.
The light is just your true awareness, the awareness of what's true in your deepest awareness, deepest mind. So then ask yourself, who is it that you're really hurting by holding the grievance? And if you're sane and aware, it's obvious that it's you who's hurting. Because the moment you hold the grievance and you have that feeling of condemnation and resentment and anger and whatever it is, who's suffering? You are. The person who you're thinking those thoughts towards, because there's always someone or some people involved, is not suffering. You are. In the moment, you're cut off from your true awareness, and you're in a very dark, contracted state of mind.
That was very, very, very true.
So it's kind of self-evident, and yet, this is the story of humanity. Although it's self-evident, so many people still do this over and over and over again, even though it's obvious you're hurting yourself. It should be that you're hurting yourself. It's not, and it's considered enlightened if you say things like this. But surely it's just common sense.
Good teaching, very good.
But common sense isn't that common as well, is it? So this is by a lady called Donna Goddard, who's an Australian author.
Yeah.
And she's really asking us to be much more honest with ourselves than our egos would like. Because it's only this kind of radical honesty that will help you uncover its dark ways and let them go, so you stop hurting yourself, which is what holding any grievance really amounts to: self-attack and self-harm. So no wonder Jesus or Yeshua calls the ego totally insane. Any thought system where you're attacking yourself continuously, your true self, which is love, so you're attacking love and its plan for your and everyone else's salvation or awakening from a nightmare, can only be mad. That's completely insane to do that. But the insanity in this world is so common that it's considered sanity, it's considered normal. And so we have these dramas that go on in the world on a personal level, and on a collective level. You look at what's happening still in the Ukraine. There's another war, and in Israel, the Arabs in Israel are still fighting, and there was no conflict in Northern Ireland, and these things just carry on because forgiveness doesn't happen. And when it does, then you get some resolution. The Irish conflict was resolved when two leaders came together and said, okay, we've got to actually find a way to live together, because this is insane. The same in South Africa. Two guys came together, Nelson Mandela and F.W. de Klerk, and they said, okay, and now we can't, like, fighting each other and having civil war is not clever. So let's find a way to let go of our grievances, and then what comes out of that is something much more functional. So history shows us, grievances create conflict and war and immense pain and suffering, and simply letting it go creates freedom, love, peace, and joy. And yet still, many people don't learn that lesson, although it's seemingly self-evident. That's the state of the world, because the ego's obsession with its thought system, it's so addicted to the guilt and the sin, and then the condemnation and the attack that have to come because of that it can't see an alternative. It just goes, that's all we can That's all we can perceive. So
it's comfortable and cowardly at the same time. It's one will revert or immerse oneself in that apparent comfort that comes from all the ego assertions. It's that's my problem with the ego anyway. It's seductive. It's very seductive.
Although it's a thought system going nowhere,
yeah,
it seems to be going somewhere. It seems to have some validity until something like the course comes in with a master teacher like Yeshua, and he trains you, and he says, no, actually, let's really look at this with the light of true awareness, and then you have to see that it's actually dysfunctional and it's not going anywhere. So you have to go beyond the known world. I don't know if you're familiar with this one, Steve.
yes,
The hero's journey. So this is the hero's journey. So it's going beyond the known world of your normal reactive patterns, your irritation, your guilt, your sin, your fear, your attack. And saying, I'm leaving that thought system behind, and I'm willing to go on this journey of growth to discover who I really am. And actually, in the end, the ego must die. So the ego is going kicking and screaming all the way. It's resisting, it's digging its heels in, because it knows that if you carry on down this track, the ego will ultimately die. And then you'll be reborn in the spirit, and then you're at one. That one-ment is the death of the ego and the reunification of the mind with the spirit. And then you bring it back into the world to teach. And that, this is a universal archetype. You look at every great spiritual teacher like a Yeshua or Buddha and many others, this is what they did. They went out of the world, they did their own practice, they collapsed the ego, there was a death and rebirth experience, and then they come back into that normal world, and they are changed. They are now the masters who can teach people how to escape from the dream. And that's what we're all here to do. Do your own journey, and then you come back and you say, well, what else is there to do but free others from their imprisonment? There's no higher calling and purpose in this world. Okay, so let's go back here. There we go. So there's a little bit of there's a past discussion session which we did last year, where we talked about discussing the inspirational quote. We discussed Advaita Vedanta and Buddhism and their similarity to Yeshua's teachings in the course. So all these parts, we've seen it today. The Buddhist abbot saying no blame, and Yeshua on the cross saying, forgive them, Father, they don't know what they do. It's the same idea, just expressed differently. So there's this universal teaching that comes through all of these authentic spiritual parts, because it's a one truth, it's a universal truth, and they're all pointing ultimately to God. It's the same God, it's the same awareness, whatever you choose to call it. So the course is just, as he said, another spiritual path. It's another way to God, but it's a very direct path, in my view. It's a very clear, simple. He doesn't beat around the bush. He's just giving it to you straight and saying, well, look, your grievances are doing this, and your anger is doing this, and your attachments, your desire is doing this, and let's just call it, the ego, what it's a spade, a shovel. He's giving a very, very clear view of what the ego is. So a lot of the teaching is about, the ego, so that you can be aware of it and you can choose to then let it go. Because otherwise, if you're not aware of it, it consumes your mind and continues in your awareness.
That
consumes your mind.
That's the greatness of this teaching. Obviously, it seems so obvious to me. I wonder why I didn't stumble on it before.
You know what Winston Churchill says, men stumble over the truth from time to time, but most pick themselves up and hurry off as if nothing had ever happened. So we've all done it at some point, and then at some point you can't do that anymore, because the truth starts to become essential. You go, I can't really live without this. My life isn't working. So, I have to find a way. And so then, the pursuit of truth becomes not just a luxury, it becomes a necessity to find your way out of, whatever the difficulty and the darkness is. This teaching, this is a summary, Elaine, of the yesterday's teaching on grandeur versus grandiosity. The key message of the lesson and the text, yesterday's lesson and the text taken together, is that only God's or love's plan for our salvation or awakening will work. And the ego's plan, which entails believing in littleness or grandiosity, rather than the grandeur of the state of pure formless awareness, will never work. That's the key teaching. It's only in the acceptance of the grandeur, he uses the word grandeur, of the state of perfect love, because it feels, it's a word that describes something internal that feels grand, I suppose. Well, it's just a word, it's a pointer, but it feels transcendent, it feels inspired, it feels awakened, it feels enormous, it feels infinite, it's just a feeling in the end. But we know that, that feeling, our feelings determine our reality. So that state of grandeur leads us into peace and joy as our natural state, and that can make us happy. Anything else we desire is really just a desire for nothing in the form of something. And so what you're doing, if you desire something else, is you're saying, I don't want the grandeur of God, I want the littleness of the ego. Even if it appears to be seductive, so whatever the illusion is, it's trying to convince us to go down that rabbit hole. But it's actually just another denial of that grandeur. So he talks about grandeur versus grandiosity. So you have the grandiosity comes when you feel little, when you deny the truth and you attach your minds to little things. Then all you can do is seek to big yourself up in the littleness. And so you seek fame and power and pleasure and money and things of the world to try and make yourself feel better, to try and compensate for the littleness that you actually have adopted. And so the grandiosity will never work. Think of someone like Donald Trump. He's a great example of grandiosity. So actually, he's a very little person, but he's tried to bring himself up by being this enormous ego, and it's the money, and he's the billionaire, and he's the president of the United States, and this great overblown ego, grandiosity. But underneath that, he's a very little, he's associated himself with a very little ego. Apparently, he would, they call him Pele at his golf club. You know why?
No, what?
Because he would kick the ball into a better position.
Oh, really?
All the time.
Yes.
So the caddies would call him Pele. Oh, Pele was at it again today. Because which is little, isn't it?
It's little.
That's very little and petty.
Yes.
And yet he's trying to be the great, grandiose self, but actually only a little person could do something like that.
I think that most golfers have done that at some stage.
Yeah, but they would probably,
when I played golf,
they would probably know that it's not correct.
Yes.
Because you're actually violating the spirit of the game that you play.
Yes.
And the game is beyond the individual score. So
Yes.
So if you cheat at it, you're violating the very game that you're supposed to respect as the golfer. So that's an example of grandiosity and the littleness, and how they actually, it's all littleness. The grandiosity is just the compensation for the littleness. So anything else we desire other than the grandeur of our natural state is really a desire for nothing in the form of something. So it seems to be something, but it's actually just the form of nothingness. And that's an impossible wish that will inevitably lead to a grievance when your impossible expectation that it can satisfy is not met. So then we have a grievance because our expectation is not met, and all of that will make you unhappy because your expectation hasn't been met. And this is what the Buddha noticed. The Four Noble Truths is simply there's dukkha, there's suffering, there's this dissatisfaction, And second noble truth is that there's a cause of the suffering. And that cause of the suffering is expectation, or craving, as you call it. So whenever I have a craving and I desire something, then I set myself up for a grievance, because I desire it, and the more I want it, well, what happens if I don't get it is that I now feel justified in my grievance, and that causes suffering. And then I have the aversion. He called it aversion, which is basically craving. I don't want it to be this way, and the more I don't want it to be this way, the more aversion I have, the more resistance I have, the more that's actually what a grievance is. And then I'm separated from my natural, loving awareness, and I'm in a very contracted, limited state of awareness, which will cause me to do unconscious things to myself and others. So all of that makes me unhappy, sabotages the salvation or awakening from this nightmare of disappointed desires and related grievances that the ego so eagerly sponsors. So giving up the ego's idle wishes and grievances will inevitably lead you to shift from littleness and victimhood, or grandiosity and pride, whichever version you want. So littleness and victimhood go together, grandiosity and pride go together, but all of that is a denial of your true reality, and helps you to see beyond that. When you can see beyond that, there's something that's far higher and greater than being a victim or being a grandiose self like a Donald Trump. There's something that just is. What can you say? That just is. And when you shift like that, it will inevitably inspire you to extend the grandeur of this inner state of love, peace, and joy to others. So then, well, what can you do but to share it? Because you go, well, this is so amazing. This is the good news that Yeshua came to share. So I would want to share it with others, because it's amazing when you understand this. And that then becomes your higher purpose, based on truly serving others. So rather than pandering to the ego's ambitions for grandiose achievements on the one hand, or to be a victim on the other, and the excessive possessions to inflate its self-importance and strengthen its identity, you say, no, I am that I am, and all I seek to do is share that knowledge, because that is knowledge, with others. And that's truly fulfilling. So this is what he's pointing us to. Beyond the grandeur and the grandiosity and the victimhood lies our true self and our true purpose, which arises from that true self. So listen to it, Elaine. That's good. If I recall, it's a year ago, but it was a really good session on grandeur and grandiosity.
I have started watching that. Yes, it is interesting, but I haven't finished it yet.
Yeah. So
that the lady, she was talking about cement in her nose. Is that the one where she's singing?
Cement in her nose. What? I haven't watched it for a year. Who was it? What was her name?
Gosh, I can't remember her name. She was blacked out. It was Dalian.
Was her name Nadia?
Yeah.
Nadia. Okay, it was that session.
She was a singer, but she did spiritual singing.
Yes, I remember.
She was upset because she had cement up her nose or something. And then you explained that, you were explaining that there's a reason for you having that there, and she said, "But I'm only doing singing for spiritual reasons." And then you said, "Oh well, that could be a spiritual ego coming in."
Yeah,
so she started
laughing.
The
conversation's coming back to me.
Yeah, is that the one?
Conversation's coming back.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, it was funny.
It
was quite funny, actually.
I remember the conversation, And, so the ego will tell you, oh, no, I'm doing it for spiritual reasons. But actually, you're doing it to get some glory. You're doing it to self-aggrandize. I want to be a singer because I like the attention. I like, being in the limelight. And then I'll say, oh, well, I'm doing it for spiritual reasons. But if you're honest with yourself, you're actually trying to big up your separate self. Genuinely for spiritual reasons,
she was
collapse. You actually have to collapse that separate self. You say, I'm not doing it. There's no separate self involved. There's no wanting to big up the separate self. I'm doing it because it feels right to do, because there's a calling, something deeper is coming through, and I want I want to share this. If you're a musician, then you want to share your music and your songs. If you're a teacher like me, you want to share the truth because that's what you feel called to do. And there's no separate self involved. The separate self is not seeking to aggrandize and be grandiose in that. It's just because it's just a deeper feeling. I just I want to share this because it feels right to do that. But it requires a lot of vigilance. You need to be very aware because the ego can easily come in, even in a so-called spiritual context, and hijack it and say, okay, well now you've got now you're the teacher, and you've got another identity, haven't you, as a teacher? And we've all done it. I mean, I did it when I started with the course. Oh, this is such a cool path, and it's so kind of intellectual, and so no one understands it, but I understand it. So what does it do? It puts you on some kind of pedestal, a bigger self than your students, which is just ego. So it took some humbling. I had to be humbled, which was painful, but it was necessary to get rid of that. To say actually, it's really just about the truth, and the truth is paramount. It's not about my little separate self, which doesn't even exist in this, because I can't. You realize you can't teach the truth and be in a little self. The two are mutually incompatible. Okay, so that brings us to the session which you're in, and our lesson, which is all about grievances. So, yeah, if you can read that. Christine, will you read that for us?
Holding grievances is an attack on God's plan for salvation.
And the alternative?
Holding grievances is an attack on perfect love's plan for my awakening.
So the alternative, I think, is a bit more explicit. It's, I'm attacking my perfect love's plan for my own awakening, which is what I actually really want. That's what's gonna really help me. When I hold a grievance, I'm attacking myself. I like this lesson because he's making it very, very explicit. That's what you're doing. Let's not mince our words here. So what I love about this teaching is it's very direct. It's just very direct. He's like, I'm not beating around the bush here. I'm telling you straight, if you hold a grievance, this is what you're doing. To make you aware that grievances and awakening are mutually incompatible. If you want to hold grievances, you won't wake up to who you really are, ever. As long as you're holding grievances, you stay in the dream world of being a separate self. Okay, so let's have a look at lesson. There we go. Lesson 72. This one is quite a long lesson actually. So we'll see how we go. Steve, would you like to read first?
I'll try, John.
Okay. No, don't try. Just do.
No,
as Yoda said. Have you watched Star Wars?
Yes.
What did Yoda say to Luke Skywalker?
No, tell me.
So I think it was the fifth one, called The Empire Strikes Back. He's gone for his training.
Yes.
And he's asked him to lift some stones with his mind. Says, well, he's asked him to lift his whole ship out of the swamp that it's buried in. So he's like, well, I'll try. And Yoda says, no, there's no try. Do or do not. Do or do not. You read or you don't read. It's very simple. So just read. Yeah. There we go. So if you read the original.
While we have recognized that the ego's plan for salvation is the opposite of God's, we have not yet emphasized that it is an active attack on his plan and a deliberate attempt to destroy it.
And then read the alternative down here.
We have recognized that the belief in separation's plan for freedom is the opposite of perfect love. We have not yet emphasized that it is an active attack on its own plan, and a deliberate attempt to destroy it. In the attack, pure formless awareness of perfect love is assigned the attributes which are actually associated with belief in separation, while the belief in separation appears to take on the attributes of perfect love. Yeah, it's strong stuff.
So any thoughts on that?
Well, it's essentially like all of these things. It suggests that things aren't what they appear to be. And the idea or the thought that you have a solution or an answer to anything is something that has to be looked at very carefully. It's it's actually inverting itself. It's running up its own arse, you could say, in many respects. And it's tricky stuff.
Yeah, really well said. So it's the ego is really up its own arse. Exactly.
Yes.
It's, very well said. Because it's got itself so involved in its own thought system.
Yes.
That it's trying to convince us that that it is God.
Yes.
This is the insane thing.
Yes,
You know,
yes.
that it is calling the shots. It's God, and the attributes that are actually associated with the ego, guilt, sin, fear, attack, are assigned to God. So now we have a false God. We have a God of vengeance and hatred and attack, and you see that very much in the Old Testament. You know, that pretty violent, vicious, psychopathic God, really.
Yes.
That was not about love. It was about, you know, condemnation and judgment and attack, and you know, one side against another. I'll be your God, but not someone else's God. So this is what, you know, the consequence of believing in the ego is that you have a false God, which you then must worship, and it all becomes very fearful. God seems to be a God of judgment and punishment, rather than a God of love. And you can't, what Yeshua is saying to us is you can't really fudge that. You know, it's going to be love, or it's going to be judgment and punishment, condemnation. But you can't have both, because they are mutually incompatible. And I guess that was his key insight. So he came into that Jewish tradition, and he said, actually, God is only love. And you know, all of this idea of condemnation and guilt and sin and sacrifice and death, you know, none of that is of love. So I've come to interpret the Torah and the Bible in another way, to show you that actually that has always been there all along, but you have misinterpreted, and you've assigned God the attributes of the ego, and you now have this false God, which you worship. And of course, they didn't like him for it, because he was this revolutionary. It's a radical teaching. Yes. But you go into the more mystical aspects of any faith, like the Jewish Kabbalah, or the Islamic Sufis, or Advaita Vedanta at the top of the Eastern tree of spirituality, or Christian mystics, and they really have this different concept of God, that God is actually a God of love, and only love. Unconditional love is the essence of God, and therefore anything else is not true and is not real. And that's really what this teaching is saying. Anything else, condemnation and fear and attack and hatred and everything we've projected onto this false idea of God, are simply not true. So the whole concept is just a false concept in the mind. That's really what he's saying here. Well, it's just the truth, and it's a truth that's universal. You can see it in every one of these great spiritual teachings and paths, that, you know, God is love, and therefore God cannot be a God of fear. Fear and love are mutually incompatible. So you have to then make a clear choice and a clear distinction, which is brings your mind into alignment, if you choose right-mindedly, with God and spirit and truth. And then you have to deny the ego to do that. So it's one or the other. And this is really the essence of what a non-dual teaching is. It's saying it's one or the other, guys. You can't choose both. Yeshua made it very clear in his teaching when he was alive. He said, you know, you cannot honor two masters. God and Mammon, as he called it. These are opposite masters, and they will take you in opposite directions. So you have to listen to one or the other. If you try and listen to both, you're just going to be very confused, because they're telling you opposite things about who you are, about the nature of reality, about where you should go, about your actions. I mean, at the extreme of this, it becomes self-evident. Let's say, if I listen to the ego is all about death and killing. I could say, well, it's equally valid to murder you and Christine as it is to do a spiritual session with you and be grateful and love you and hug you and be kind and grateful. So that those would, if both those thought systems are equally true, then those two different pathways would both have equal validity. Well, we obviously know that's not the case. No, the one is completely insane and will have awful consequences for everyone involved and will create an enormous pain and suffering. And the other one leads to happiness and peace and joy. So it's very obvious that they're not created equal. You have to choose amongst it. I mean, that's an extreme example, but extreme examples are useful in this teaching. So if someone says, oh, well, that both the light and the dark are equally valid and they're both created by God, well, that's an obvious argument. You say, well, okay, so then it's equally valid. If it's all equal, all the same, well, I could go and kill someone, or I could go and give them a hug and love them, be kind to them, and it's all the same. And I think intuitively we know that that can't be the case. In fact, we would have no sanity in society if that was the case. There would be no basis for any kind of sane decision making. We wouldn't have laws that said, it's illegal to kill people because it would be equally valid to kill people as to not kill them. So that's a proof that actually this non-dual teaching is correct, and you can observe it just in practical human life. If we didn't have these laws that said, hurting others is not okay, then we would have no sanity in our society. We have no basis for any kind of sane society, any kind of happiness, really.
It says also, John, that there's no choice really. You have to. People always talk about you have a choice. In a situation like this, there is no choice. And it's been something that's been experienced by all sorts of people, but you have to make a choice that there is no choice.
Very well said, Steve.
And Bob Dylan sings a song, you've got to serve somebody. I don't know if you know that song. And he sings, maybe the devil and it may be the Lord, but you've got to serve somebody. And it's a very profound song, actually.
Yeah, well, it's the two masters idea in song.
Yes.
Yeah, you do. It's going to be one or the other. You have to have a thought system to guide your life. You can't operate in this world without some thought system guiding your words and your actions.
Yes.
So which one is it going to be?
Well, it should be patently clear. That's
why
I say there is no choice.
Yeah,
there is no choice. Why are you talking about choice?
Because you are just absolutely. That's exactly the point.
Yes.
When you collapse choice, then what's left is oneness. There's no choice in oneness.
Yes.
See, so that's what Yeshua is trying to teach us, and all the masters. Okay, ultimately, you seem to have a choice between sanity and insanity, but there isn't really a choice because you don't really want to be insane, and that's very hurtful and destructive. So there is no choice, really. There's only oneness. There's only love to choose, which means once you've collapsed the other alternative in your mind, there's no choice anymore. You simply are that which is. Then you are in the grace of God. You're doing the will of God, and there is no other will. And that's exactly what he's trying to bring us into alignment with the one will, the single awareness that we call God. And you realize there's no choice. So Yeshua and other masters like him attained that state of Christ consciousness, or the Buddha was called the awakened one. That's what it means in Pali, Sanskrit, because they came into this awareness through much spiritual practice and experience that there is only one awareness, and that awareness is their awareness, and there is no separation. And that's the simple truth behind all of these great teachings. They all say the same thing. There's a singular awareness, which is the ultimate truth, and there is actually no choice. There seems to be an alternative in this world. You have this idea of a separate self from the ego, and everything that it stands for, a thought system. But I actually, in truth, there is no choice. And when you understand that fully, then you're enlightened, because you understand that there is no choice. I am that I am, and there is nothing else. And it simply stands as it is, and I am that which I am. And there's no other possibility than to be what I am. And then the ego is undone. But that in our world, that's as I think Quail said, whoa, this is deep stuff. Because it collapses your entire separate self. There is no alternative anymore. There's no separate self. There's no duality. For the ego, this is death, because it's like, oh, I'm being undone here. There's no longer an entity to choose, a seemingly separate self. To the spirit, this is awakening, because I'm awakening to who I really am beyond the illusion of choice. It was always an illusion. We gave ourselves a false idea, which we then could seemingly choose, this idea of separation. But if the idea itself is not true, then the choice for it must be false. So the idea of choice implies a split in the mind, must be false. There is no choice, ultimately.
That's very clear.
And that's the essence of the non-dual teaching. There is no choice. I simply am that I am. And actually, I don't really have a choice. I think I do.
Yes.
But when I come into my true awareness, I realize I never really had a choice. I couldn't really ever choose to be what I'm not.
Yes, there is no choice. That biblical saying, which I love actually, is that birds have their nests and frogs have their lairs. Where's the Son of Man to rest his head? You don't have to ask that question. There is no choice. You know where the Son of Man is to rest his head. And there's no escape.
There's no escaping the truth.
There's no escape.
Yeah. So you may as well surrender then. If it's the truth and there's no escaping the truth, then the only sane thing you can do is surrender to that. Say, okay, I get it. I am that I am. I am divine, I am eternal, and there's nothing else. And that is called enlightenment in this world. And people who do that are considered enlightened and very special, but actually they've just got some sense. They've just woken up to the simple truth of what life is.
There's a gesture that I attribute to rabbinical teaching. I don't know where I get it from, but I've always, and it's when faced with certain circumstances that are important in life. To my mind, the rabbis used to do this.
Yeah.
This is not for discussion. It's patently clear. Basically, it's what it's saying is, what can you say?
What can you say?
Yeah.
And in the Islamic tradition, they have the word inshallah.
Yes.
Inshallah, it's the will of God. Okay, well, what can we do? We just have to surrender.
Yes.
So this is all these traditions. You can see it, but too often there's the ego is still very much there, and so it covers it over. But if you look into them, you'll see that the truth is there, and you can find it in all the great religions and spiritual traditions. This is just very explicit. Because he doesn't beat around the bush. He's not, there's no ambiguity and no equivocation. He's saying, right, here it is in plain English, which is very helpful to have such, direct teaching. And of course, it will push buttons. The ego's, it's just, radical and different because he's just being very direct. But that's why it works.
When you're confronted with truth in any way, you might want to offer whoever you're with, the other option. You can say, not only what choice is there, it's just the way it is. It's what can you say is all you can say. Is what can you say? And there's nothing you can say. So shut up.
Well, that was kind of how the conversation went with Quail, wasn't it? He's like, well, can you prove it? I'm going, no, you can't prove it in the way that you want proof. Okay, well, show me. but it's self-evident. You know, I am that I am. What is. What else can you say? But for those who are still questioning, that's not obvious, you see. So then it becomes, whoa, that's quite a revelation. So you need to journey it, and that's why we do the mind training. You journey it until you get to the point where you go, okay, it's obvious, it's self-evident to me, and I've accepted it. And this belief in separation doesn't have a hold anymore. Okay.
Yeah, it's again, I must repeat that rabbinic gesture, which may or may not have happened, which
It's a great. Yeah, who knows? Yeah, that's great.
Icon too in WhatsApp.
Yes, yeah.
Is there a thing for that on
Well, there's kind of like, there's that one. Is there?
Yes, I thought I'd seen it
Yeah.
on the computer.
Who knows?
Fred uses it a lot.
Does he?
Mm.
Yeah. Who knows? Who knows? Well, the spirit knows, but I don't know anything. That's really the,
Mm.
you know, my ego mind doesn't know anything.
Yeah,
It's only when I get out the way that, and I allow that, you know, that deeper awareness to come through that I know anything. But then it's not really me knowing it. It's actually knowing through me.
Mm.
I am the known, not the knower. Okay, so Elaine, would you like to read number 2 for us? Kindly, in the original.
Oh, sorry, Elaine, I've been making so much noise. I
No,
hope
don't apologize. It's all, you know,
No. It's all
all part of the
spontaneous,
session.
isn't it? Yeah, it's all
This is what we
spontaneous.
do.
We
It's
have
fun.
to speak from
It's
the
fun
heart.
and interesting and engaging, and hopefully people listening will find it, you know. There's definitely
Yeah.
some laughs, that's for sure.
Absolutely, yeah. No, that's what we need. Can't beat a
Yeah,
good.
so if you want to read read it the
Okay.
original and then
The
the alternative.
ego's fundamental wish is to replace God, and the belief in separation's fundamental wish is to replace pure formless awareness of perfect love. Yep, that one's. And in
Okay,
fact,
so that's pretty
the
clear.
that's clear. In fact, the ego is the physical embodiment of that wish. And in fact, the body is the physical embodiment of that wish. I would say.
Yeah, so I just changed that because it's actually not the ego. The ego is of the mind, but the ego, the belief in separation, embodies that wish to be separate in the body. See, literally, that's why we have bodies and body. It embodies it. It manifests it in the body. So now what's the best proof the ego has that you're a separate self? The body.
The body. Yeah.
Okay, well, you've got a separate body from me, so you must be separate.
Jesus, I'd swap you anytime, good.
But actually, in some ways, right, you're closer to your graduation day than I am.
Oh,
So isn't that if you're the sole purpose of life is to graduate to the higher realm, then in fact you're in a better position than I am, because I might still have another 30 or 40 or 50 years to go.
poor bugger.
Exactly. So when you turn it on its head, you go, well, actually, you're closer to liberation.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So would you really swap me?
Yes. No.
No.
It's I had a very dear friend who died recently, who was a skeptic.
Yeah.
He was, in fact, the founder of the South African Skeptic Society.
Really?
Yes.
I
love that man. He was the founding father, I should use.
Founding father
of South African
Wow,
Skeptic Society.
Okay.
I miss him terribly.
Yeah.
His approach to things was so refreshing
Mhm.
and so open. And I said to him, I'm skeptical about skepticism.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
You would have to be.
Yes.
So how did you respond to that?
He says he had a T-shirt made, which I have, of which I have one.
Mhm.
It just says, "I doubt it." He was the most wonderful guy, absolutely wonderful guy. I miss him terribly.
Well, it's interesting because the Buddha said, don't believe anything I say question it, and come to your own understanding. So doubt, skepticism is the beginning of spiritual awakening.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Yes, no,
Because if you're skeptical of how things work in the ego, you start questioning it.
Yes.
And then that takes you in the direction of another thought system. The danger is the skeptics often then struggle to not be skeptical about anything. So they're then skeptical about the truth as well.
Yes.
And so they end up in no man's land of, well, I'm skeptical about that, I'm skeptical about that, and so I'm skeptical about everything. So what do?
Yeah.
How do I live my life? I'm skeptical about everything. I have to believe something.
Well, they find ways of doing it. My argument with people who are atheists is not about the belief in God or anything like that. But I've found with people I've known, very nice people, a lot of them, who were atheists, they took cover. They hid themselves in something, the worst of all those isms, which is cynicism. I find cynicism horrifying, absolutely horrifying. And when it comes to God and things like that, I've very dear friends of mine come out with these blatant, I think, obscene, cynical assessments of something. The miracles, for example, which, you know, I don't have any strong feelings about the miracles at all. The reincarnation and one thing and another. But a friend of mine, Chrissy knows her too, we're not such good friends anymore, which I suppose happens.
If you disagree fundamentally, it tends to.
She's part of a cynical chapter in the atheist groups, which makes fun of people with religious faith. And one of her favorite ones is talking to his invisible friends. That was the thing that they would say in a special way. And there's a whole a book of cynicism that goes along with the modern atheist intellectual view of spirituality. And they hide in the humor, because it can be very funny, cynicism, and they hide in that humor. And I'm finding it very difficult to get on with them. I've lost a lot of friends recently, and I'm okay without them though. I think I've got Chrissy still.
Yeah. Well, do you really want to hang out with people like that?
Yeah. No, well, that's a big question.
The cynic is not inspiring. Cynicism and inspiration are it's the opposite. I'll show you this actually very quickly. So this is something called the integral model. So a very smart man called Ken Wilber came up with it. So Ken Wilber was he's probably the world's greatest living philosopher, in my view, anyway.
Yes.
So he's one of these incredibly learned, highly intellectual men, but also with a connection to spirit. So he holed up for about 3 years after his wife died. His wife died of cancer in the 1980s, late 80s, and then he just kind of did this and this only for 3 years. He'd written a number of books at that point, but he took all of it. What he was trying to do was find a theory of everything. So it's like take all of the spiritual teachings and all of the philosophies and all of the religious understandings and humanism and philosophy and science and all of it. And can you come up with a model that kind of explains it all? That was his challenge. And he came up with this thing called the integral model, which is a good teaching of as I've seen to explain it. And so he says that there are these four. This is just a part of it. One of the key parts of it is that these different dimensions of life. So there's the individual on that axis and the collective. Right? So we all have you seem to be an individual self, but there's collective, there's families, there's groups, societies, the whole of society is a collective. So we have those dimensions to our apparent life. And then you have the interior and the exterior as well. So I have my internal thoughts, emotions, perceptions, everything's going on inside. And then I have what's objective. Okay, so I have my body and I have performance outcomes. I can act and do various things, and I can see the effects of that. And so now we have 4 different quadrants where they intersect. Individual interior is the subjective I of thoughts, emotions, memories, states of minds, perceptions, and immediate sensations. On the other side, the individual exterior is the material body, including the brain, and anything that you can see, feel, measure, touch, taste, and perceive, or observe scientifically in time and space. So what cynics do, the atheists, they actually have a religion, right? They have a belief system, and that belief system is called scientific materialism. So that is one would say, the default religion of this world. Because most people, without knowing it, actually believe in that. You go, well, science, we've been brainwashed into the idea that science has all the answers, that everything is material. And if you can't see it, feel it, touch it, taste it, measure it, feel it, measure it, it's not real. Right? That is the scientific materialist paradigm. But that is based on a false science. That is based on Newtonian physics, which is 400 years old now. And has been invalidated. It's been proven to not be correct. The quantum mechanics, the theory of relativity, these have come in the last 100 years, have disproved that and said actually that is not an accurate view. It doesn't accurately describe what's actually going on here. And yet still they believe in it because it's become a dogma. It's like so. The counter to them would be say, no, you are just as dogmatic as someone who's a hardcore Islamic fundamentalist, or one of the hardcore Christians in the Bible bashing Midwest, who is absolutely so convinced that they're right that they won't open their mind to anything else. They have the same dogmatic attachment to a fundamentalist belief. And a guy called Rupert Sheldrake talks about this, and he criticizes science. He's saying it's become like a religion. It's the dominant now religion of the world, and the fundamental assumptions of it are not questioned. They're just assumed to be true without question. So they say, well, only what you can see, feel, measure, touch, and taste is real. This is an assumption, but actually that's not the case, because quantum mechanics has shown us that there is no reality in the absence of observation. That's the fundamental premise or interpretation of the Copenhagen interpretation of quantum mechanics. So even in science, perception comes into it, consciousness comes into it. You can't deny what Ken was saying. You can't deny this whole interior dimension and think that you have reality there. What you have then is a lopsided, one-sided version of reality, which has denied these interior aspects and says these don't even exist. And the reason why the ego does that is because what better way of keeping itself intact but by denying that you even have a mind? Because if you don't even have a mind, you can't change it. You see the cunning of it? If I don't even have a mind and I identify myself as a body, then I can't even change my mind. And then it's safe, because if I can't change my mind, then this paradigm of the ego, the separate self, will remain, and it will remain unquestioned. And so the scientific materialism is a massive defense against the truth that actually they are still pure formless awareness of perfect love. What underlies all of this is this interior, individual, subjective sense of self that cannot be undone. And this is what all the spiritual masters and mystics have discovered, that when you go into this, the interior individual I, then you discover the I am presence that simply is, and that cannot be explained, it cannot be undone. This is all that's true. And the external world is just a pale shadow of that. It's a reflection or projection of that. So you're familiar with Plato's cave analogy?
No, not really. I've touched on it, but very.
So brilliant analogy, because the analogy goes, or the allegory actually it's called, that this person is born in a cave like everyone else, and they're born in chains, and they're looking at the cave wall. And the cave wall has all these images, but the images are coming from various figures that are behind them, and there's a fire behind that. So the shadows projected onto the wall. Now, these people who've been chained up all their lives perceive the images as reality. And they go, well, these shadows on the wall are images. In modern terms, this would be like a movie, projected onto the screen, and everyone's going, the images are all real. But the master, Socrates, turns around because he starts to question the images. He says, no, these images aren't real. What's shown on the screen of the exterior is not reality. There's something else. Something in him is stirring and saying. So he turns around and he sees that these are it's a puppet show. It's these figures and puppets and whatever that are being projected onto the wall. And beyond all of that is the light. He sees the entrance to the cave. So he frees himself from his chains. He goes out, he goes into the blinding light. He's blinded to start with. He goes, wow, there's a whole new world. There's another reality. And he gets very excited because he wants to go back to the cave and he wants to free everyone. So he goes back and he says to the guys who are still sitting there watching the images, guys, I've got really good news. This isn't reality. What you think is real isn't really real. Actually, just turn around and follow me and I'll lead you to the light. There's a whole real world outside of this and of course they don't welcome him, they stone him because they don't want to know that there's another reality. So in the same way, the atheist will not welcome you saying, guys, you're actually just confused. You're perceiving the images on the screen of time space, this four-dimensional screen of time and space. You're perceiving those images as reality, and you have a fixed dogmatic attachment to that, when in fact the only true reality lies within you, in your own mind. The only reason, the only reality these things have is in your own perception. And you might try referring them to quantum mechanics, Copenhagen interpretation, because you could say your science, you believe in science, go look at quantum mechanics, because quantum mechanics is saying exactly what the mystics have said for thousands of years, just in a slightly different way. But there is a reality in the absence of observation is remarkably like what the mystics have been teaching for thousands of years. And so you could at least get them to maybe question that. But because they are so rooted in that paradigm, it's a dogma. They are like fundamentalist religious people. They won't listen. They're just like, no, it becomes a dogma.
John, I'm not educated enough about atheism and the questions and answers, but from an early stage, I read Richard Dawkins' book, The God Delusion, and it occurred to me very soon afterwards that that everything is a delusion, and that that we can't live without delusions. That I was thinking in terms of related to atheism in a big way is something which I find quite fascinating, which is Darwinism, the evolutionary rules of things. Every law that seems to come from that area seems to be based on delusion. So it's impossible to have anything without a delusion.
But beyond the delusion, this is the interesting. So go beyond that, because it's a thought system, the construct of the mind. And if you go beyond that and you go deeply into your own true awareness, then you find a state that's beyond delusion. And that's the only place you'll find sanity and you'll find truth. And this is what the mystics have done. And then they look at all this, they look at the shadows on the cave wall, and they go, none of that's true. It's not real. So it's a complete opposite of the scientific materialist, say atheist, who's fixed on this. The mystic says, actually, only this is true. Actually, this is just a projection of the mind. It's all delusion. It's a product of a mind that's deluded itself into the belief in separation, and now projected that out and seemingly has the evidence for its delusion outside. The mystics understand that. So, there is no reality in the absence of observation. It says, I only give it it's only real because I perceive it to be real. So if I perceive it not to be real, here's the key thing. If I perceive it not to be real, then that is my escape from dream.
Yes.
And that's exactly what forgiveness does. Is you perceive it not to be real. You simply say it's not true, it's not real. And how do I do that? I deny that these things in the body and observable effects, I deny that any of that has the ability to affect my state of mind. That's how you say it's not real. And that's what letting go of forgiveness is really about. So then in the doing of that, you're denying the reality of this delusion. And so you deny the reality of the delusion or the projection of your separate self. You also then must deny the separate self, this projected. And that's the way out. And that's what all the masters know. So you simply have to deny everything that the ego is projected, which is completely the inverse of what the scientific materialists are doing, because they are denying the truth. They're denying this entirely. And so never the twain shall meet. They won't agree because they each deny the other's truth. But only one of them is true. They can't both be true.
No.
Yeah, they can't both be true because they completely contradict each other.
Yes.
It's self-evident to those, who the more you come into this awareness, it becomes self-evident that must be the truth. Because actually everything is in mind. You experience everything in mind, you perceive everything in mind, everything comes back to, how you perceive it. So what's outside of there is only you perceive it because you have a mind to perceive it. So the true reality, fundamental reality, must be in mind. And so, you can do this a lot in many different ways. You can come to the same conclusion. And therefore, changing the mind is the only way out. You can't. What the scientific materialist seeks to do is to change this, so we can make the world a better place. But the mystic says, no, that's delusional. That's delusional. Just change your mind about the world. So Yeshua says, seek not to change the world, but seek to change your mind about the world, because that's the only that's the only salvation. You'll only find it by changing your mind. In other words, changing your perception about the world. And if you perceive it correctly, then it no longer has the ability to harm you or irritate you or make you angry or make you fearful or enslave you in any way. You're free of it. And that's the enlightened state.
Jono,
Yeah.
I'm starting to feel very tired.
Okay. Well, you can...
so my focus is diminishing. And my inclination is to take refuge in... not in the ego, but in another place, which I've seen referred to as the ineffable. No,
the ineffable.
The ineffable. It's Freddie and I talk a lot about it. And I saw a wonderful cartoon by a great cartoonist and a very good poet as well, in which he shows a graffiti. A big wall, and someone has written in big bold letters the following: F the ineffable.
Okay.
And that's a good place to stop things, I think.
Okay. Well, we're going to carry on. If you need to go.
I'm afraid I won't be able to focus, so I'm going to go.
Well, you could just sit here and absorb the energy. You don't have to focus. Just sit and bathe in the frequency, if you like to. You don't have to participate.
No, but I'm feeling very tired now. And
okay. That's fine. Thank you for joining us.
Did
you find it engaging?
Fantastic. It's absolutely, but I can't go on like this all night.
No, I can.
Yes, I know.
So I'll continue.
You're still young, you see.
Oh. Yeah, relatively so. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm just, my focus is just so diminished now that it wouldn't be worth me trying to even sit out and listen to the music, even though I miss the words. The music is good, but I think the music that I require now is deep snoring.
Right. Okay. Well, join us tomorrow if you like, 12:30. Sorry, 1:30. If you'd like to.
And what am I doing tomorrow, Chrissy?
1:30, yeah.
I'm coming here at 1:30. Okay.
She's got you sorted.
There's some blanket if you're feeling cold.
Yeah, okay.
And there's another one.
Not really, actually. I'm okay, but
when you're in there.
yeah, thanks.
You carry on.
Yeah.
Oh, she's gonna have to bed.
Huh?
She's also,
Stick with us for half an hour. Yeah. And
he's
then
got to
we'll
have
do a
someone else
meditation.
here to as a witness
Huh?
to what's going on, Chrissy. And
Okay.
I'll talk to you tomorrow, John.
All right. See you
Thanks a
tomorrow.
lot,
Thanks
man.
for coming. Yeah. It's great. Thank you for your contribution. It was just great. All right, Elaine. Sorry, we keep getting sidetracked, but we'll focus a bit more. Where are we? Number 3. What is that wish?
For it is that wish that seems to surround the mind with a body, keeping it separate and alone and unable to reach, other minds except through the body that was made to imprison it. And I think that one's the same, is it? I need that moved up a little. There.
Yeah. Yeah, and that one's the same, so you don't need to read it again.
So for the limit on communication cannot be the best means to expand communication, and limit on communication cannot be the best means to expand communication. Yeah. And yet the ego would have you believe that it is. And I would guess, yet the separate self wants you to believe that it is.
So yeah, I mean, what's he saying there in summary?
Well, the ego wants to believe it's God.
Yeah.
And the fact that we have a body, and that proves to them that we are God.
Is this wish to be a separate self seems to surround the body.
Mind and the body, keeping it separate and alone, and unable to reach other minds except through the body, which makes it imprison it.
Yeah. So we think, in order to reach another mind, we have to speak, we have to touch, we have to, act with our body, but actually we can communicate with our mind. The highest kind of communication is just thought communication.
Yeah.
But the ego has created a reality where that all seems to be denied, and we seem to be bodies, because it's its best argument that we're separate, that we have a separate body. So the limits on communication, which is the body, cannot be the best means to expand communication, yet your separate self wants you to believe that it is. Okay, so the ego will fanatically insist that only the body is real, everything happens through the body, and that you're not a mind. And so that you can't connect with other minds directly on a mental level because you don't even believe you are a mind, you believe you're a body. And that's the extreme of the scientific materialist paradigm we talked about. Doesn't even believe you have a mind. They struggle with that, because it doesn't make any sense. They can't really then bring consciousness into their model. How do you explain consciousness then? Where did that come from? The best they can do is say, well, it came from the brain. Okay, so the brain then produces consciousness. Well, what produced the brain then? They can't answer that. What produced the brain and the body? Surely there must have been some consciousness that produced that. It didn't just happen. But they would have us believe that it did just happen kind of randomly. This was all kind of created, and then consciousness came as a result of the brain. That's an insane belief. It doesn't make any sense. It's evident that there must have been some consciousness, some seemingly intelligent design behind all of this. Not actually intelligence, it's insane, but there was a designer of the whole thing, the universe, of the body, that has created it as it seems to be. And then most people mistake that for God, and they say, well, that designer or creator was God. But this teaching is saying, no, that's actually the ego pretending to be God, masquerading as God, and you have to see through that illusion. Okay, so summary of that done. Let's move swiftly on to number 3 then. We read number 3.
Christine? Is it
No,
Christine's turn?
Christine's just seeing Steve
Oh,
out, I think.
Oh, I see. Yeah, of course. Although the attempt to keep the limitations that the body would impose is obvious here, it is perhaps not so apparent why holding grievances is an attack on God's plan for salvation. And
Alternative.
although the attempt to keep the limitations that a body imposes is obvious here, it is perhaps not so apparent why holding grievances is an attack on perfect love's plan for awakening. Right. But let us consider the kinds of things you are apt to hold grievances for. But let us consider the kinds of things you are apt to holding grievances for. The same. Are they not always associated with something a body does? And the same. A person says something you don't like. Person says something you don't like. He does something that displeases you. He betrays his hostile thoughts in his behavior. She betrays her hostile thoughts in her behavior.
Yeah. So, I mean, what is he saying here in summary? I mean, he's just highlighting that grievances and the body are totally related, aren't they?
Yeah.
And grievances associated with something a body does.
Yeah.
Person said something, they've done something. Well, the body's real, what they've done is real, therefore grievance is justified because it's really happened. But it's all related to what they've done or said in a body, which is a delusion. So the grievance must be a delusion as well. So he's trying to get us to question, the delusion and undo it at its source, which is in our mind, believing in this idea of separation.
Does that apply to accidents where it's just an accident? It's nobody's fault. There's no grievance. It's just an accident.
Yeah, but you can still hold a grievance. If you resist anything, a grievance is not just resentment towards a person. A grievance is resisting what is. That's what a grievance is. So an accident happens, and even if it's no one's fault particularly, you can hold a grievance about that accident for many years if you want to.
Even though there's no one to blame.
Why did that happen?
Yeah.
Why did that happen to
Right.
me?
Got you.
Life's so cruel, life's so unfair. Why did I get, let's say you got paralyzed. Right. Why did I get paralyzed? Although no one was really to blame, it was just a kind of random accident. You have a grievance against the situation. You say, why did that happen to me? And so you're resisting what is, and that's what a grievance is. Right. So we have all kinds of grievances against the weather. Oh, the weather's so bad. I have a resistance to that. Then that's a grievance, isn't it?
Right.
It's subtle, and it's not as major as a grievance you hold towards someone, which is what he's primarily talking about. But still, I'm holding a grievance. Any desire for something not to be as it is, which in Buddhism they call aversion, is a grievance. Right. So Yeshua calls it a grievance, Buddhism calls it aversion. It's the same thing.
Yeah.
So now I have a grievance against this, and what that does is it separates me from my true awareness. I'm now in a limited, contracted state of mind, going, well, why did this happen? How could this have happened? And my mind is associated with form. So grievance attaches you to this timeline. It pulls you down onto the timeline and says, this has really happened, whatever the thing that stimulates the grievances. This has really happened. You're a separate self who's experiencing this, and now you experience the trauma and the pain and the suffering of it fully because you've judged it as real. And all of that just roots you. Ego, psychological and emotional attachment, which happens in the desire and expectation of the grievances. That's what that attachment means. That roots you onto the timeline. You're now like magnetically glued onto this timeline. So time and space become your reality. And you seem to be a human being now moving through time on this linear pathway to death. That seems to be your reality now. And so the ego's attachments, its grievances and its expectations are what do that. They root you onto the timeline, and therefore they condemn you to pain, suffering, aging, and death. You see that? Okay, so happy with number 3.
Mhm.
And we'll look at number 4. So you're not dealing here with what the person is.
What, me again? Christine back or?
I don't know if she's... Christina, are you going to come join us for a bit longer, or you're heading for bed?
Yeah.
Okay.
So good night.
Yeah.
Good night. Good night. Nighty
Yeah. Is it
night.
okay if I continue? Should I lower my voice? Or can you close the door? Yeah, and the other one. It'll probably be another hour, maybe.
What's in that room?
Thank you. Yeah, perfect.
Good night.
Okay. See you in the morning.
Good night.
What's happening?
Okay. So,
Okay.
contrary, you're exclusively concerned. So you're not dealing here with what the person is.
You are not dealing here with what the person is, and same on the alternative. On the contrary, you are exclusively concerned with what he does in a body. And on the contrary, you are exclusively concerned with what they do in a body. The same. You are doing more than failing to help in freeing him from the body's limitations. You are doing more than failing to help him in freeing them from the body's limitations. And you are actively trying to hold him to it by confusing it with him and judging them as one. And you are actively trying to hold them into by confusing it with them and judging them as one.
Yeah.
Here,
So you see what we're doing? We're confusing the body. We're making the body the identity of this person in our minds.
hmm,
And that's the fundamental confusion in identity, because they're not a body, they're actually a mind that is in pure formless awareness of perfect love. So it's a fundamental confusion in identity.
yeah.
Okay? Herein
Okay.
is
Herein is God's attack. For if his son is only a body, so must he be as well. And herein pure formless awareness of perfect love attacked, for it is extensions. Its extensions is only a body, so must it be as well. Yeah. And finally, a creator wholly unlike his creation is inconceivable. A source wholly unlike its extension is inconceivable. Yeah.
So when you summarize that, what's he saying?
Well,
What's he saying? here in summary?
We're just purely seeing exclusively the body. We're not dealing with what the person is. We're just dealing with the body. You're failing to help in freeing them from their body's limitations by doing this. And you're actively trying to hold them by confusing and judging them as one.
You see the inversion of truth. We're making God, ultimate source, into a body. We say God's responsible for bodies, and then the sickness and the death and the aging and the suffering. It's a total denial of pure formless awareness of perfect love. The source, wholly unlike its extension, is inconceivable. So if we identify ourselves as bodies, we have to think of God as an entity that has some kind of form. You see, so we give God a form, identity. Now God is a concept in our minds. We may even visualize God as some kind of old man in the sky. Which is how he's painted in some of the religious paintings. Because the source, wholly unlike its extension, is inconceivable. But if we could just realize that only pure formless awareness of perfect love is true, and its extension is only in the mind, then the confusion is cleared up. There is no body. The body is a delusion.
Yeah.
Which is completely the opposite of the ego's viewpoint. So you see again, you can't reconcile it.
No.
In any way, shape, or form. Okay. So happy with number 4?
Yes.
Okay. Number 5, God is a body.
If God is a body, what must his plan for salvation be? What could it be but death? Oh, sorry, I skipped the alternative. Pure formless awareness of perfect love is a body. What must its plan for freedom be? And 2, what could it be but death? And that's the same. In trying to present himself as the author of life, I can't quite see, there's a little thing blocking the...
And not of death.
Yeah, the author of life and not of death. And what could it be but death? Oh, sorry. Yeah. In trying to present itself as the author of life rather than death, it is a liar and a deceiver, full of false promises and offering illusions in place of truth. Right. The body's, the body's apparent reality makes the view of God quite convincing. The body's apparent reality makes the view of perfect love quite convincing.
This view, yeah. So he's talking about this. This is the ego's view of God or perfect love. So the ego is attached to death, believes in death, and it says, well, your only liberation is death. You must die to be free of your suffering.
Yeah.
This is why suicide is, I think it's the second biggest killer in the world.
Yes. Yeah.
It says to be free, you must kill yourself.
Right. Yeah. Just
Well,
killing the body, but yeah.
You're killing the body, but if your mind hasn't woken up, then you remain in prison.
Yeah.
Well, then you have an unawakened mind with guilt and sin and fear, and now you've got to deal with your suicide as well. That gets added to the mix, and then you come back because you haven't corrected your mind.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because a healed mind doesn't believe in death. So how can you think death is a solution there for anything? How can the death of the body accomplish anything, really?
Yeah. Yeah. Mhm.
So yeah, he's giving us a very clear picture of how the ego inverts the truth, and how its thought system then proceeds.
Yeah.
And so it'll tell you that God, the author of life, is a liar and a deceiver, because everything dies here. And this is the cynical view. Well, everything dies, so there can't be a God. There can be no God because everything dies, and they only allow themselves to see that. They cannot see eternal life because they're focused on the opposite of it, which is the ego's miscreation. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Sorry, there's a lot of horses flying past.
Come on back up here.
Just a bit of noise there. Right. So where am I?
Horses. Okay.
Yeah, there's a lot of horses trotting by, so I had to put on mute there. Anyway, yeah, they're
Okay.
passing. Yeah. So, in fact, if the body were real, it would be difficult indeed to escape this conclusion. And in fact, if the body was real, it would be difficult indeed to escape the same. That's the same.
Mhm.
And every grievance that you hold insists that the body is real. And every grievance that you hold, it's the same. It overlooks entirely what your brother is. It reinforces, where am I? It overlooks entirely what other people are, right?
Oh.
Yeah. Oh. And it reinforces your belief that he is a body and condemns him for it. And it reinforces your belief that you are bodies and condemns them for it. Right.
That they are bodies, that they are bodies.
That they are bodies.
So the ego's whole obsession, its religion, is really scientific materialism must maintain that everyone's a body, because it denies the mind even exists.
Yeah.
They are bodies, and then the ego goes, well, the body is actually very dysfunctional. It's very impermanent, and it condemns them for it. Because you can't believe someone's a body and truly love them, because the body is dysfunctional. It can get old, it can get sick, it can die. So it's actually not a human home. The ego, although it identifies with the body, believes that the body isn't good enough. And then that sense of self-loathing that it experiences is projected out onto other bodies, and then that self-loathing condemns them for being bodies.
Yeah.
You get it?
Yeah, I do.
Okay.
And it asserts that his salvation must be death, projecting this attack onto God and holding him responsible for it. And it asserts that their freedom must be death, projecting this attack onto pure formless awareness of perfect love and holding it responsible for it.
Okay, so then what we do is we say that actually God is this vicious, vengeful, wrathful God. Let's go back to here. The consequence of all this delusion is that we must perceive God as a fearful, wrathful, separate God. Because that's our own guilt and sin and fear and attack projected out onto a false concept. That's the ego's version of God. That's what the ego's set up. And when you talk about disproving the notion of God, I mean, Richard Dawkins, the God delusion, all he did was he sought to disprove this. Okay, so you disproved a false concept of God. Fine. But that doesn't disprove. He didn't address this. He didn't disprove this, but he's defined God as this. Okay, well, you've defined it in the normal religious terms. Well, yes, it is false. So it's not difficult to prove that it's false. But that doesn't mean that the true God, which is probably beyond his conception, he does actually hint at it in his introduction for a page or two. Hints at something beyond, but then never explores that in the book. Just sets up a false God, and then it's easy to shoot that down because it's so obviously false. But to shoot this down is impossible. So we misdefine God and then say, well, there's no God because I've proven it false. But actually it was just a false concept of God that you proved false. Okay, so number 8, it reinforces your belief.
It reinforces your belief that they are bodies and condemns them for it. And it asserts that their freedom must be death, projecting this attack onto pure formless awareness of perfect love and holding it responsible for it.
Yeah, so we think, this vicious, wrathful God is going to destroy us. And we go, God is now responsible for death. God can punish us. God can kill us. It's insane. How can pure formless awareness that is perfect life kill anything? It wouldn't be the essence of life itself if it knew how to kill, would it?
Mm-hmm.
So this is just a delusion. And so he's highlighting that delusion here very clearly. It's saying this is what the ego believes. But when he points it out so clearly like this, it's self-evidently a delusion. Okay, so what do you want to summarize that paragraph? What's he saying in summary here?
Well, we're
Number
thinking
5?
we're thinking God, pure formless awareness, is a body. And the only way to get freedom is by death. So, thinking it's a revengeful God and it's a liar, deceiver, full of false promises, offering illusions in place of truth.
So this God, many people become disillusioned with it. Because they go, well, you're supposed to be a God of love, and then there's all this pain and suffering and sickness and death in the world. How can that be? Well, you must be a liar and a deceiver, and then we become cynical. So often these people, talks about the atheists, often they've had experiences that cause them to disbelieve the power of love. Well, how can a God, maybe they at some point believe, but how can a God of love do this? Because they look at, with the world or something's happened to them, they've had a trauma. You go, how could a God of love, be responsible for that? And so then they lose their faith and they become cynical and they project their faithlessness onto they see the false self-concept, and they go, that's false. But then they throw the baby out with the bathwater and they say, well, then there's no God, you see, because they can't look beyond that concept and go, well, maybe that was never true. Maybe that was just a false concept of God. So that's what he's really saying in that paragraph.
I mean, there's those, like my parents were atheists. They didn't really see God as wrathful or bad. They just said he just doesn't exist. Doesn't exist. That's basically what their concept of it was. my parents.
Hmm.
So they didn't see it quite as wrathful and fearful.
Well,
and
you
all
don't
of
know. Did they have a belief in pain and suffering and sickness and death in the body? Yes, they probably did.
that. My mother did, yeah. My mother, yeah, she certainly did.
So, although they wouldn't have gone, well, that's God, their concept of reality would have been, well, this is quite a painful, fearful one.
Yeah, cynical. They were both very
Quite
cynical.
cynical.
Yeah, they
Yeah,
were.
so
Actually.
this is what happens. You become
Yeah.
cynical and you become disenchanted with everything,
Yeah,
because
true.
you deny that there's anything beyond this physical world, which is a
Yeah,
dire
that's
state
true.
of affairs. You go, well, this is reality. This is everything it is. So I have to accept the reality of disappointment and pain and suffering and sickness and death. And there's no God. So there's nothing transcendent. There's nothing else. And of course
Yeah.
you're going to be depressed and cynical,
Right.
because you observe what happens in this world. You go, well, it's hardly all roses. It's in fact
No.
very often
Pretty a lot of suffering.
dysfunctional and very painful.
Very.
But you've, what Yeshua is saying is, well, you've identified yourself then with the false God. You've identified, that only the body is real. You've denied the source, which is in your own mind. And now God, even though you may not overtly believe, so there is no God, actually in their mind, there's still the God, just the idea of punishment. That, okay, well, I've separated from God and now I will be punished, and I'll be punished by the harshness of life. I'll be punished when I get old, and I'll be punished because I die. I'll be punished by sickness. And this all seems to be very real in the perception, because that's what they've decided is real. And then there's apparently no escape and no hope. Then all they can hope for, the cynic, eventually all they hope for is death. Now that's where cynicism leads you. Maybe you saw that with your parents.
Well, my father's actually still alive. Yeah, so he's still fit and well, actually. So even though he's cynical, I don't know what his secret is. My mother's, she passed away a couple of years ago, but but they are sort of misery itself, really, when it comes to life, and yet he's still going strong. So,
but is he happy? I mean, has he found some source of happiness or joy, or is he just like, well, life is just a misery? In which case,
yeah, he gets his positive days. Yeah, he enjoys his walks, but he gets very angry very easily. He gets very angry with things and not much patience. But but he's still going strong. So,
but in his mind, maybe his release from this, what he would perceive as a pretty miserable world would be death. So when he dies, then that's the ego's version of freedom.
Don't know with him. Yeah, like I say, he doesn't.
Well,
seem
you'd have
to be
to
worried.
question him. But what else is there? If you've denied the transcendent dimension, you've denied God exists, then what else can you hope for but death to free you from?
He seems to be pretty accepting of it, though. He doesn't appear to be in any fear. Like I say, he gets angry and he's very grumpy and gets miserable, but I can't say he's worried about dying. No, I wouldn't say he is.
No, because he might go, well, that's release. When I die, then I'm free of all this. So this is the upside down view that death of the physical body is freedom.
Yeah, he's a bit of a mystery. I don't know what his thoughts are.
Well, you have to unpack his whole thought system, but this is what Yeshua is helping us do here.
Yeah.
And we'll look at if someone is an atheist and they've denied God, then this is actually their deeper belief, but he's probably not even aware that these are his beliefs.
No.
It's all unconscious because he's never examined his mind.
No. Yeah, but he's still going strong. So don't know what his secret is.
Well, in his deeper mind, he might be hoping for death as his final kind of release from all this. You don't know.
Don't
If you
know.
talk to him,
Don't know.
you might, well, you'd have to ask him, but he might not be willing to talk about it.
Oh, I think he
probably
would.
ends up-
He doesn't appear fearful of death at all. No, he's very accepting of it. So yeah. Maybe, well, I'm going to be seeing him soon, so I'll ask him.
Well, maybe on some level there's some acceptance. You know, there's something more than just
Maybe.
the ego going.
Maybe. Yeah.
Well, if he's found any kind of genuine peace, then there must be.
Yeah,
There's any
I
kind of
think
peace
so.
of mind, then
Yeah.
something more going on, but he maybe hasn't acknowledged it.
No, I think that's more what it is. Yeah, that's what it is. Yeah. So where was I?
Yeah. So you understand what he's saying here, that if you believe you're a body, reinforces your belief that there are bodies, everyone's perceived as a body, and then condemns them for it, because the body is actually a very dysfunctional thing. It's not actually good enough. The ego is not good enough for the ego to be the ego's home, even though the ego cherishes and identifies itself with the body. The ego also loathes it and says, "Well, this isn't good enough because it can get sick, it can age, and it can die. So this isn't really a worthy home." But it has no other, because it's denied that heaven exists. So there's nowhere else for it to go but the body.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that paragraph done. Let's move on to number 6. To this carefully prepared arena.
To this carefully prepared arena, where angry animals seek for prey and mercy cannot enter, the ego comes to save you. To this carefully prepared arena, where angry animals seek for prey and mercy cannot enter, the belief in separation comes to save you. God made you a body, and the pure formless awareness of perfect love made you a body. Very well. Very well, yeah. Let us accept this and be glad. The same, let us accept this and be glad. As a body, do not let yourself be deprived of what the body offers. And, that needs to be moved up in the alternate. As a body, do not let yourself be deprived of what the body offers. Take the little you can get. And, what number am I on there? 6.
God gave you nothing. 7.
Oh, 7, right. God gave you nothing, and pure formless awareness of perfect love gave you nothing. And the body is your only savior. The body is your only savior. It is death of God and your salvation. And it is the death of perfect love and your freedom. Yeah, so it's just all the opposite.
What he's trying to show us is totally inverted.
Yeah.
The body, which is actually imprisonment, is seen as your freedom. So you're identifying with your body, that's freedom, but it's evidently not, because you're imprisoned in this body. It can get sick and old and age and die. So how's that freedom? But the ego is telling you it is. Which is why it's totally upside down and insane.
Yeah.
Okay, so what's he saying there in summary?
Would you believe that the belief in separation is here to save you. And it's the opposite to pure formless awareness. Pure formless awareness made you a body. And it's very well. And we have to accept this gladly as a body. And do not let yourself be deprived of what bodies offer. Take the little you can get. This is what the body is trying to tell us. The body is our only savior. It is the death of the perfect love and your freedom. So it's the opposite. It's
completely twisted the truth, hasn't it?
Yeah.
Into something
opposite
and telling you the body is your savior, and
it's the opposite.
The death of the body is your freedom. Wow. I mean, but actually, the truth is that pure formless awareness of perfect love is the truth, and awakening to that is your freedom.
Mm.
And that's transcending the body entirely.
Mm.
And you never reconcile those thought systems. They'll just be opposite forever.
Yeah.
Until you choose that to accept the truth and the truth alone, you'll have a split in your mind. It'll be a fundamental contradiction. So he's just highlighting that. What I like about the way he's done it, he's saying, well, here it is, we're going to lay it out. This is the ego's thought system. Very explicitly, is this what you want? Is this something that you think makes sense, that you want to believe in, that will bring you peace and happiness and joy? And when he lays it out, in this way, it's obvious that it's not. It's self-evident that to believe this would be insane. Okay, so happy with that.
Yeah. I'll do one more paragraph and then I'm going to take the dogs out.
Number 7, okay. So, we nearly, let's just see how many got out of truth. There's 3.
There's quite a few.
So there's 3 more paragraphs before meditation. Do you think you can do 3 paragraphs? Or?
I can do one, but I've got quite a few things to do, actually. I've got dishes to do and So I'll do one more.
Yeah. All right.
Okay. This is the universal belief of the world you see. And the same. This is the universal belief of the world you see. Some hate the body and try to hurt and humiliate it. And the same. Some hate the body and try to humiliate it. Others love the body and try to glorify and exalt it. Others love the body and try to glorify and exalt it. But, while the body stands at the center of your concept of yourself, you are attacking God's plan for salvation and holding your grievances against him and his creation, that you may not hear the voice of truth and welcome it as a friend. But while the body stands at the center of your self-concept, you are attacking perfect love's plan for awakening and holding your grievances against it and its extension so that you do not hear the voice of truth and welcome it as a friend. And your chosen savior takes his place instead. Your chosen savior takes his place instead. It is your friend. He is your enemy. Pure formless word. Well, need that lifted up a little bit. Oh, yeah. Right. It's your friend. Pure formless awareness of perfect love is your enemy. So again, it's all the opposite. Find that the truth, the peace, and joy that is our birthright.
Yeah, so it's telling us exactly what grievances do. Grievances make the body real. They invert reality. they deny God, and you then have to follow this insane, vicious thought system that denies truth and tells you that it's going to be your savior. It's going to bring you happiness and peace and joy and freedom. When evidently it's not. It doesn't work.
No, it doesn't.
So our chosen savior takes the place of pure formless awareness, and so that this is how the false God arises. It is your friend. So we see the ego as our friend, and pure formless awareness of perfect love is the enemy.
Yeah.
And sadly, most people in this world, if you're unawakened and you're not on a spiritual path, then that's your view.
I don't know how they survive.
Well, it's not a very happy reality.
No.
Because you deny your source. So you're living in a state of fear and
What's
anger
going to happen
and
next?
irritation. And what's going to happen next? And somehow, as you say, your dad just continues, so his body still lives, but it's not a very, very happy reality. So you might argue, what's even the point?
No,
You're living in a miserable reality. What's the point of a miserable life?
Yeah, I think he is tapped into something else, but yeah, he's a bit of a mystery, my father. Bit of a mystery. So I think there is.
Well, if he can enjoy things like walks, so he can enjoy his walks and he can be present to those, then he's not completely believing in the ego, is he? And
I think, yeah.
There's some connection with source, because
he doesn't realize it
in the present moment. Yeah. But
intellectually,
his belief is, but actually, when he say goes on a walk or he does something, there is some connection with spirit.
I think so. Yeah, I think so. Yeah,
there is. And so that's probably what has kept him going strong, because he's got a connection. The problem is that unless you do, mind training like this, that remains very buried. He doesn't even know it. There's no conscious awareness of it.
Because he likes this simple things. I've seen him sitting on the balcony, and you can see he's at peace. So he is connected, but he just doesn't realize it. That's for sure.
Yeah, because he's probably misidentified. You see, what most atheists do is they set up a false God in their mind. They go, well, this religious God, this fearful, wrathful, vengeful God of the Old Testament, I can't believe that. That's false. So therefore, there's no God. Yeah. But all they've done is they've seen the falsity of a false God and not believed it. So actually, if they took it a step further, they could find the truth, because you must deny that concept of a false God in order to find the true one.
Yeah.
So they've gone half of the way, but then they stop there.
That's what's
happened. And they go, well, therefore there's nothing else. But actually, that's just a block in their own mind to what is there.
Right.
Your dad can probably access that in moments, and he can experience
it
on his walks and when he's sitting, and so that's what keeps him going. He's actually accessing the true God, pure form of awareness, but he doesn't know it.
That's
because he's defined God as something else. He's defined God as the God of religion, and he's decided that that's false. Well, that's true, it is false. So he's kind of halfway there, but then to consciously become aware and acknowledge this would be his next step. To say, okay, I'm aware that in this awareness, in the present moment when I'm feeling quite peaceful and happy, that there's a presence there. There's something there. So what is that?
Right.
Okay, well, maybe that's God. Maybe I've defined God falsely all my life. Maybe that's actually God, and then he would start to come into awakening.
Yeah, I think
awareness of what he really is.
Yeah.
But his ego is probably scared of that. His ego won't allow him to see that, because it's terrified of going there, because then who would he be? He wouldn't be an individual self anymore.
Yeah.
And he wants to maintain, the illusion of that individual self. Even though it doesn't make him happy, he's not aware of that. fully. He's
Yeah.
not aware of this whole.
That makes
So this
sense.
is the problem. If you don't examine it, you don't really look at the thought system, then there's no awareness. Okay, so you're an atheist and you deny the false God, but you don't know that beyond that, lies the truth. You don't know that it's just a false God that you deny because you have no awareness of any of this.
Mm.
So this is why we do the mind training, so that you become aware of what's really going on.
Yeah.
And then you can make conscious choices. Say, well, yeah, of course I'm going to deny a false God, but that doesn't mean I throw the baby out with the bathwater and deny my own true awareness. Well, that would be insane. How can I deny my awareness? There's just the very fact that I have some awareness and that I have life is proof of the existence of God. And you could say that too. How do you live then? How do you have a life? Oh, well, I was, born into a body. Okay, well, what's behind that? What you're born into a body, but that doesn't explain the mystery of life. How come you have life then? And so scientific materialists and atheists, they can't really explain this.
He's very scientific, my father. Well, he was a science teacher. That's what he was.
Yeah. So he's into the scientific materialist paradigm. So ask him, well, how do you explain consciousness then? How do you explain we all have consciousness? The scientific materialist paradigm can't explain it. Well, it's called the problem of consciousness in science, and they can't crack it unless they go beyond science, because their science doesn't, a Newtonian physical paradigm doesn't explain consciousness. So then they say, well, consciousness can't exist. It's a product of the brain. What actually the more honest thing would be to do is to say that our belief system is incomplete. We don't actually understand. Maybe our belief system is flawed because it doesn't explain this fundamental thing called consciousness. That would be the honest thing to do, which would mean that the entire paradigm that they believe in, scientific materialism, would have to be questioned. But they don't want to do that. So they prefer to believe in an illusion than question it.
Yeah, well, I shall ask him when I see him next.
Ask him. Yeah, he might get angry, though. I warn you.
He is an angry. That is his nature. He does
You're
get
pushing his buttons. Then you're questioning his fundamental belief system, and
so I'll have to do it in a roundabout way. Somehow or another, I'll find a way.
You don't believe in God, but then, Dad, how do you believe that we even have life? Then what gives us life?
Well, you just go by the brain and that kind of thing, and water.
But then what created the brain? He says, well, the brain gives. And what created the brain then? We seem to have some kind of intelligent design.
You just could say
what created
you
the
just
brain?
Say our parents. You just say that we were born by.
But we evolved. I mean, what's the source of it? Our parents did, but then they had brains and they had bodies. So what's behind it all? How come? How come bodies exist? How come people?
You say the Big Bang.
You
probably say the Big Bang.
Okay, so what? So is there no intelligence behind the Big Bang? What's behind it all? There seems to be some kind of intelligent design to the universe that we now have bodies and we have consciousness and we have brains, and what created all of this? Surely there must be an intelligence behind it that designed it. So ask him these questions.
I will do,
because they can't really answer. They can't really answer. They say, well, the brain created. Okay, well, what created the brain then? What created the brain and the body?
Interesting to see what he says.
They just randomly manifested, kind of all random, just a complete random product of some evolutionary process.
Right. Well, I shall ask him.
How can that be? There seems to be an intelligent design.
Yeah, he's
something
just been
assembled the body into its current state. Something seemed to create the world. It seems to have something, or these patterns of, well, surely there must be an intelligence behind that.
Yeah, well, I shall certainly ask him, but I can guess he'll be the same as any other scientist. The other scientists don't have an answer, do they?
They don't. So they just resort to a dogma, and they just stick to the dogma. They go, well, the brain created consciousness, and I'll just stick to that. but they can't
I
explain
think he might sort of say we came from nothingness and we'll go into nothingness. That might be his answer.
Okay, so then ask him, what is nothingness? What is nothingness?
Oh well,
Maybe
I can give it,
nothing.
give it
Maybe no thing. You see how you start, maybe no thing. So nothing means no thing, Dad. So no thing means no form. Correct. You might say, okay, there's no form. There's no thing there that you can, see, feel, measure, touch. Okay, but everything's going back to nothingness. Maybe it's going back to the truth. Maybe actually the no thingness is the truth.
Well, I can give it a go.
Yeah. Certainly make him think.
Yeah, right. Well, I'll let you know what his comments are when I can get him in the right mood, in the right frame of mind. Yeah. I shall give it a go.
Well, all you can do is, ask these questions and make him think a bit beyond his existing. Okay, well, this is just a dogma that he's accepted. Dogma means that you're just accepting it as a belief without any evidence.
Which is exactly what he's doing. He's just very much.
Say, oh, there is evidence because it's the whole of science. But if you say to him that the science of quantum mechanics and theory of relativity are saying that Newtonian physics is false, so he's believing in an outdated theory of science, Newtonian physics, which has been proven to be false. Quantum mechanics has superseded it. So did the theory of relativity.
Yeah, but he's still in the center of the world of politics. He gets angry with the politicians and finances. That's very much his topic. So he's very in the center of the ego system. Yeah.
Scientific materialism says only the what you can see, feel, touch, taste, and perceive in the objective world, in the exterior, is real. And none of this even exists. That's the extreme of that paradigm, which is a complete denial then of mind, of anything beyond the physical. But then how did the physical come into being? It doesn't explain it, because you've just denied what's given birth to the physical.
Yeah, I think that's you hit the nail on the head. It's denial. That's what it is. Denial.
So Rupert Sheldrake, you might actually refer him to Rupert Sheldrake's work, because his criticism of the scientific materialist paradigm is that it's a dogma. It's like a religion.
Yeah.
And they just hold to this belief irrespective of all the evidence that contradicts it. And they say they're being scientific. The scientific method is one of inquiry. It's saying, okay, well, do the results match the theory? And if they don't, then the theory must be incorrect. That's the true scientific method. So then we need to expand our theory, because the theory doesn't match the evidence. But the dogmatic fundamentalist scientists are like, no, it doesn't matter. We believe anyway, whether the evidence contradicts it or not. We just deny the evidence that contradicts our belief. Well, that's not good science. That actually denies the science that they purport to believe in, doesn't it?
Yeah, true.
Because they're not actually following the scientific method. The scientific method says follow the evidence, see what the evidence shows you, and if the evidence in your existing theory don't marry, then maybe your theory is wrong. Maybe you need a different theory. And so you change the theory. You don't change the evidence. What they do is they just deny the evidence in order to maintain the theory, which is exactly what religious fundamentalists do. We just believe in that anyway, irrespective of the evidence.
Yeah, no, it'd be interesting to have this conversation with my father.
Very interesting conversation.
Yeah.
It'll be a very interesting conversation, and you might, just get him to think about, okay, well, actually,
you never know.
Does this thought system that I believed in for so long, does it actually stack up? Does it actually make sense? Or does, Lane have a point? So it's a thin edge of the wedge. If he considers some of your things, then it might take him on a path of inquiry, which would ultimately do away with the entire paradigm. And the scientific materialist paradigm would then be undone, and then he'd have to believe in something else.
Yeah. You never know. You never know.
You never know. You do never know. All you can do is drop it in there. Even if he doesn't seem to accept it, know that on some level it's going in.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I shall see what happens. Yeah. Yeah. I'll give it a go.
Yeah, well, I look forward to hearing
To the outcome. Yes.
story. Yeah, hopefully
Right.
America.
So thank you very much there, but I'm going to go off and do my little chores, and I'll wait to see what the next episode is about. How long are you in South Africa for?
I'm not sure. Probably about a month. Just depends
Okay.
on how things go. I need to go down to a country called Swaziland.
Okay.
We still need, there's other people involved, so we need to plan a trip. So
Okay.
I don't know exactly,
Right.
but yeah, as soon as possible. I don't want to stay here unduly. I have a wife and son to get back to. So,
Of course, yes.
but yeah, probably mid-May.
So just
But
look.
we've got internet here, and we can make a plan for the power, even if the lights are off. There's inverters, so the electricity routers still work. So the
Right.
the power still, I can still get connected, and I've got about 3 to 4 hours battery life. So even
go
if
with
it's
the flow.
Go
So with the flow, yeah. So I'll just look on the Telegram for any next. The next.
Yeah, well, the next session is going to be tomorrow. Yeah, I mean, we're still going to do sessions. The next session is tomorrow at 12:30. Yeah.
Right. Oh, that's right. Great.
Kind of thing. Yeah.
Okay. I'll bid you good night and namaste.
Okay.
Namaste.
Thank you, Elaine. Thanks for joining as usual and your participation, contribution, and see you tomorrow.
Yeah. Good night.
Okay.
Bye. Bye.
Well, bye. Okay, so let's have a look at number 8 and number 9. So close this one out. So we will try today to stop these senseless attacks on salvation or freedom in the alternative. We will try to welcome it instead. Your upside down perception has been ruinous to your peace of mind. You have perceived yourself in a body and the truth outside you, locked away from your awareness by the body's limitations. Now you're going to see or perceive this differently. Okay? So you perceive yourself in a body, truth is somewhere outside, locked away from your awareness, and now we're going to turn that all around. That's what he's saying. Okay, so the light of truth is in us. So the light is awareness. The awareness of truth is in us. Where it is placed by God, where it is placed by pure formless awareness of perfect love. So it's still there, the truth is still there, it can never be undone, fortunately. It is the body that is outside us and is not our concern. So the body isn't us, it's actually outside of our mind, it's a delusion, so it's actually not our concern. To be without a body is to be in our natural state. So it's completely turning around our paradigm, saying we're not bodies, we're actually just mind. If you look at the integral model, we're not the exterior individuals. We think we are, we're actually just individual interior I. Subjective self, the I am presence. This is the I am that I am presence that is the oldest name of God in the Bible. Moses saw a burning bush, he having a mystic experience and came back and said, I am that I am. That's the name of God. So to be without a body is to be in our natural state, to be aware of the truth in us, is to recognize ourselves as we really are. To see or perceive ourselves as separate from the body is to end the attack on perfect love's plan for awakening and to accept it instead. So isn't that interesting? We have to perceive ourselves as separate from the body in order to awaken to ourselves. To end the attack on perfect love's plan for awakening and to accept it instead. Wherever its plan is accepted, it is accomplished already. Yeah, so what he's saying here is we must see ourselves as separate from the body. We must perceive ourselves correctly as mind and only mind. And the interior individual self says, I'm only mind, and the exterior apparent reality is just false. It's an illusion. It doesn't really exist. So it's complete reversal of the scientific materialist paradigm that says only the body is real and the mind doesn't exist, and never the twain shall meet. They will contradict each other forever. Okay, so moving swiftly on to number 10. Our goal in a longer practice periods today is to become aware God's plan for salvation has already been accomplished in us. So our goal in longer practice periods today is to become aware that perfect love's plan for awakening has already been accomplished in us. To achieve this goal, we must replace attack with acceptance. And so we can't continue attacking, we must accept. Accept the truth. Acceptance of pure formless awareness of perfect love. As long as we attack it, we cannot understand what perfect love's plan for us is. We're therefore attacking what we do not recognize. So now we're going, trying to let go of all judgments and ask what perfect love's plan for us is. So we ask a question to invite the presence in. Say, what is freedom, my source? I do not know. Tell me so I may understand. When we're waiting quiet for its answer, we have attacked perfect love's plan for awakening without waiting to hear what it is. We've shouted our grievances so loudly, we have not listened to its voice. Used our grievances to close our eyes and block our ears. So he's telling us how we've used grievances to deny truth of who we are. And that's all the only purpose they really serve. So this is the purpose of grievances, is to block our true awareness, to block us from pure formless awareness of perfect love. So now we would see and hear and learn. So we want to learn truly, what is freedom, my source? What is salvation, Father? What is freedom, my source? Ask and you'll be answered, seek and you'll find, knock and the door will be opened. It's referring to that famous quote he said. So Yeshua says, do not seek to change the world, but seek to change your mind about the world. And that's what we should truly be seeking. And whenever you feel your confidence wane, your hope of success flicker and go out, repeat your question and your request, remembering that you're asking of the infinite creator of infinity who created you like himself. What is salvation, Father? I do not know. Tell me so that I may understand. So what is freedom, my source? I do not know. Tell me so that I may understand. It will answer, be determined to hear. So it's really just asking us to ask, ask for the help, ask for the guidance, and it will come in. If we ask, then we shall receive. Ask and you receive, seek and you'll find, knock and the door will be opened. Famous biblical quote that Yeshua said during his life, repeated here. So ask and you allow the answer to come in. And then you realize that grievances and any denial of that source is delusional. So to finish off this lesson, to finish off with a short practice period, holding grievances is an attack on perfect love's plan for awakening. Say that to yourself. Let me accept it instead, and then ask, what is freedom, my source? So reminding yourself of this lesson opens you up to your source, to awaken to that source. And that is your freedom. Freedom lies in awakening and learning. So instead of denying it by holding your grievances, you accept it by letting them go. And that is the end of the lesson and of tonight's session. So thank you to everyone who joined, Elaine and Christine and Steve. Thank you for hosting us, Christine, on staying in Christine's house, and for your participation in the session. Our next session will be tomorrow. That's Wednesday at 12:30 UK time. It's 1:30 South African time. So join us then. Hope to see you then, and wish you good practicing and a very peaceful sleep and morning ahead. Namaste, which means the awakened self in me acknowledges and honors that same self in you.